The Unexplained Rundown is pleased to partner with tpublic.com and bring you some fun and fantastical apparel and accessories that are truly out of this world. If you're keen to support the show and see it grow, be sure to check out some of the cool designs in the merch store and grab yourself a bargain. Use the link in the description below.
Or concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and we've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected, because no one has been able to see the whole picture until now.
Friends, welcome back to another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. It's good to be with you. I am your host, Grant Lavac. If you're new to the channel and you found it intentionally, then like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours, and you crave to know what's real and what's not. Welcome to some friends. Jasmine, always good to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your Friday morning in Australia to join. Clark Watson's here too. Great to see you, legend. Thank you for tuning in. Good friend Jimmy is here as well. So it's great to see some regulars in the chat. For those of you that are new to the channel, if you want to, if you like the content you see today, feel free to give it a like, share, subscribe. If you want to go above and beyond, just the standard. Like, share, subscribe. There are some Patreon membership options and YouTube membership options that we offer. So if you want to support the channel and see it grow, take a look at those options. Links are in the show notes below. We do have a growing chorus of Patreon members. So I just want to say a quick shout out to our current Patreon members, Jasmine, Jimmy, we've got Shane, we've got Clint, and we've got on YouTube member Telekinetic. So thank you, gang, for your ongoing support. I truly, truly appreciate it. We've got a massive show lined up today, folks. So as always, I don't entirely know how long I'm going to go for. I'm going to try to keep it under the 3-hour mark. I seem to be getting up there each time, but today's going to be a document-heavy session. So if you like deep dives, then this is for you. If you're not a fan of dense documentation, then you might want to jump on over to X and catch Lou Elizondo live doing a Q&A. So I'm going head to head with him at the moment. So I said to myself, I will not compromise. I will stick with my time, and I'll probably only have 3 folks watch this live, but that's okay. It's being recorded. People can watch on demand. So again, thanks for taking some time out of your day to join me, folks. We do have a poll in today's episode. So the poll is the title of today's episode is the Royal Australian Air Force in the dark on UAP. So I'm going to show you and present an argument that I believe is pretty compelling, that shows that the Royal Australian Air Force has been and probably still is in the dark and has been completely out of touch with the UAP UFO topic since really ODNI's preliminary assessment on UAP was released on the 25th of June on 2021. Good to see you, Joe. Thanks for joining in. Please feel free to catch up at your leisure and watch on demand, but thanks for dropping by to say hello. So we do have a poll in the show today. Will the new Chief of Air Force take the UAP issues seriously? And your answer options are, I'm feeling good about this guy, or dude, it's RAAF. Or 2 words, plausible deniability, or last option, thank you, I needed a good laugh. So a couple of options for you to toy with and consider, and we'll show the poll results towards the back end or about halfway through the show. So let me pull up the slide deck which I've got prepped and ready to go. And here we go. Now, obviously, just want to also, I am a huge fan when it comes to Halloween. So we are only a week out from Halloween, less than a week out. And obviously, keen to learn what you guys are planning for your trick-or-treating season this year. If you've got some plans, we've got our UAP UFO abducting some pumpkins there on screen. So just a bit of a fun graphic to kind of set the stage. So yeah, interested to learn what you're planning to go as this year for your Halloween trick-or-treating session. Last year, I was working on a very slim budget, so I decided to go as none other than our good friend John Greenwald Jr., the Foyer King, with my daughter. Spared no expense on her costume, so I went on the cheap last year. So I'm undecided on what I'm going to do this year for costume ideas. Had a few ideas. One was to go as none other than Jason Sands, who those that know his story may have a bit of a chuckle with that graphic. So, and there it is again. I heard that last time as well. So little bit of a gag there, folks. So, or last year's bestseller, we had obviously the paper mache alien. I was undecided last year if I was going to spoil myself with that, but I'm thinking this year, seen a few times now in the clearance bin, our good friend Ashton Orb. So don't think I'm going to waste my money on that approach this year. So I think I'll give that one a miss. Anyway. Moving along, folks. So let's keep this show rolling. So again, today's show is talking about the Royal Australian Air Force and really presenting an argument as to how in the dark and really out of touch the Royal Australian Air Force is when it comes to the UAP topic. So let's kick things off. All jokes aside, obviously, just a little bit light to keep it to start it off the front end. So, who are these three gents that you can see on screen? So, I'm going to be talking about each of them today, and a little Easter egg at the bottom right footer of the thumbnail. You can see Peeping Tom, Sean Kirkpatrick there. So, just checking in. So, who are these three gents? So Mel Hupfeld was the Chief of Air Force. Air Marshal Mel Hupfeld was Chief of Air Force from 2019 to 2022. He was succeeded by Robert Chipman in July of 2022, and he was the outgoing Chief of Air Force in July of this year, and he has now been succeeded by Stephen Chappell, who took command, was transferred to him in July. Fun fact, some of you may not know, Stephen Chappell is the son of Aussie cricketing legend Greg Chappell. So I didn't know that until someone pointed that out for me. So we're going to be talking about each of these guys, primarily Mel Hupfeld and Robert Chipman. Stephen Chappell's new in the role of Chief of Air Force, so really not too sure what his position is as of yet on UAP, and if he's going to take it more seriously than his predecessors, but certainly time will tell. So we'll spend a good chunk of time assessing Mel Hupfeld and Robert Chipman and their positions and statements on UAP to date. So let's use that as a good starting point, and I'll just focus on, for the moment, I'm going to pull up, let's stay on Mel Hupfeld for the moment. So we'll stay with him, and I'll kick things off just with a clip of Mel Hupfeld was asked questions by, and many of you that watch the Unexplained Rundown regularly, this will come as no surprise to you. So sorry if this is a little bit repetitive and boring, but hopefully this episode will serve as a really good, thorough, and comprehensive overview of the RAAF's really lack of appetite and engagement on the topic today. So wind the clock back to the 27th of October of 2021, where in a Senate estimates hearing, kind of like a budget oversight hearing, where Australian senators question folks in positions of leadership in government and the Australian Defence Force to ensure that taxpayer dollars are being spent appropriately, not being wasted. that the broad Australian public and government is getting a return on investment, obviously. So following the release of ODNI's preliminary assessment on UAP on the 25th of June 2021, Australian Greens Senator Whish-Wilson asked the then Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Mel Hupfeld some questions about UAP in an Australian context. So we'll kick things off with this clip of Senator Peter Whish-Wilson asking then Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Mel Hupfeld some questions on UAP.
Senator, it's Air Marshal Mel Hupfeld, Chief of Air Force. I am a pilot and I used to fly aeroplanes, not current now, but I think I've got the information you might need depending on your question.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, great. My question relates to the, I know we have close ties with the US, we share intelligence. My questions relate to release of the report on the 25th of June 2021 by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Preliminary Assessments, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. This is an issue that has been raised in Congress. The Department of Defence has submitted a report. It's become a significant matter of public interest. And I suppose my first question is, are you aware of that report, Chief of Air Force?
I'm not formally aware of the report, but if I'm thinking there was an article in the newspapers, a commentary about that at some stage, but I'm not quite sure of the content of the report.
Okay. Just as a matter of interest, what questions did you think I was going to ask?
I thought you were going to ask some questions about aircraft, but it sounds like you're going to ask questions about UFOs.
Well, we'd be very interesting to hear your views on this. Look, yes, it has been reported in the media extensively, both here and internationally. I'll just read you a few statements or the executive summary of that report. It basically talks about UAPs as being something that the US Department of Defence is taking seriously. The Pentagon has a task force assigned to better understanding the data interpretation of recent sightings. The report says UAPs clearly pose a safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to US national security. And then it goes on to talking about the 144 cases that the Pentagon looked at. Only one was clearly explainable, the others remain unexplained. They claim that after carefully considering the information, the task force reports that UAPs largely witnessed firsthand by military aviators and were collected from systems that were considered to be reliable, and that most reports describe these UAPs as objects that interrupted pre-planned training or other military activity. So could I ask whether the Australian Air Force or the Australian military also has any task force looking at UAPs? Is this something that's you're familiar with at all here in your brief?
I'm not familiar with nor have seen any reports or information regarding UAPs in an Australian airspace context, and there's no Air Force-led task force that looks into this phenomenon.
So we don't do any monitoring of this at all?
Well, there's been no reports that I'm aware of, Senator.
No informal reports from pilots or
none from any aircrew or aviation organisations that I'm aware of.
Well, there's no reports because there's no reporting protocols in place. No reports, no reporting equals no reports. I mean, look at what has happened with AARO since they've implemented mandatory reporting procedures. Reporting has gone straight up. Obviously, reporting bias, but you've got a huge influx of reports. And you could just see how uncomfortable Mel Hupfeld was with that line of questioning. I think he was caught completely off guard with that line of questioning, and quite concerning, obviously alarming that, you know, this was several months after the ODNI had released its preliminary assessment on UAP, and he hadn't even read it. He was aware of it. He'd seen some articles in the newspaper, but as the chief of the Australian Air Force, he didn't even bother to read or be briefed on UAP. Clearly, some issues that are keeping the US up at night. And case in point is if we actually pull up ODNI's preliminary assessment as the first document that we'll look at for today. So if I pull this up for you, and if you can see that on screen, I might zoom on in a bit so it's a little easier on the eyes there. So preliminary assessment, unidentified aerial, now anomalous phenomena, 25th of June, 2021. So really some of the key things that Mel Hupfeld should have really been aware of in this preliminary assessment from the ODNI is that UAP clearly pose a safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to US national security. And we know that the United States has since said that UAP is a global issue. It's not just isolated to the United States. Considering consolidation of reports from across the federal government, standardized reporting, increased collection and analysis, and a streamlined process for screening all such reports against a broad range of relevant United States government data will allow for a more sophisticated analysis of UAP that is likely to deepen our understanding. So again, signs that the United States Department of Defense, ODNI, is taking this issue very seriously as a national security issue and a safety of flight risk. And the Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Mel Hupfeld, has not even read the report, is not even aware of it, and is caught completely off guard with Senator Peter Whish-Wilson's line of questioning. Some other things to call out in ODNI's preliminary assessment. They state, we were able to identify one reported UAP with high confidence. The others remain unexplained. So 144 reports were assessed and investigated. Of those, 80 reports involved observation with multiple sensors. Most reports described a UAP as objects that interrupted pre-planned training or other military activity. And we've heard that time and time again, which we'll talk about later today. UAP collection challenges, narratives from aviators, this is in the United States, in the operational community, and analysis from the military and IC describe disparagement associated with observing UAP, reporting it, or attempting to discuss it with colleagues. Although the effects of these stigmas have lessened as senior members of the scientific, policy, military, and intelligence communities engage on the topic seriously in public, reputational risk may keep many observers silent, complicating scientific pursuit of the topic. And I believe, unfortunately, that's exactly where we are today in Australia. You have pilots, you have folks in the Australian Defence Force Services that are reluctant and reticent to report observations of UAP out of fear of stigma, reprisals, being ostracized. They don't want to have a black mark placed against their record and have basically be ridiculed and have higher ups laugh basically at their reports. And nothing would happen to those reports because there's currently no investigatory body in Australia that investigates UAP, the phenomena and reports from the members of the Australian Defence Force. I think that's all I wanted to highlight for you in this particular, one or two other things. UAP, this is the key one. Obviously, this is why Mel Hupfeld should have read this report. UAP threaten flight safety and possibly national security. UAP pose a hazard to safety of flight and could pose a broader danger if some instances represent sophisticated collection against US military activities by a foreign government or demonstrate a breakthrough aerospace technology by a potential adversary. This was 2021. Fast forward to February 2023, and what do we have? Not just the Chinese spy balloon, but 3 unidentified aerial objects that were shot down by the United States Air Force. Canada identified, they marked one of those unidentified aerial objects as a UAP. They classified it as a UAP, the one that was shot down over the Yukon. And Daniel Otis has done some great reporting on that particular case, and he recently was able to secure for release through Canadian FOIA a very grainy black and white image of what was observed and shot down over the Yukon. Ongoing airspace concerns. The UAPTF, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force, has 11 reports of documented instances in which pilots reported near misses with a UAP. Clear and present danger to safety of flight. Again, this is what Mel Hupfeld should have at least been briefed on, or at least read the report. This is the unclassified report. You think that in his position he would be privy to the classified report. So that's what I wanted to touch on for you from ODNI's preliminary assessment from a couple months prior to this hearing, where Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Mel Hupfeld was being pressed on UAP. So let's now jump forward to another exchange, some additional questioning that Senator Peter Whish-Wilson asked Mel Hupfeld at that same hearing on the 27th October of 2021.
Have you seen any of the video footage that's been released by the US military? It's unclassified. It's been reported on by the New York Times, the Washington Post, even the conversation here in Australia, which, as you know, is quite a respectable conservative media outlet, has written a report. They're not saying they agree that these things may be more than aberrations, but they are saying that finally there's a mature conversation now happening around UAPs and trying to better understand them.
Senator, through professional curiosity, I did look at some of the videos that were attached to those media reports. They were interesting but not compelling to me, and I don't believe everything that I read in the media.
All right, we had to put that little dig in there at the end to throw the stigma up. But you found those videos interesting but not compelling. Well, why didn't you find them compelling? Because if we come back to our deck here, the three videos in question is obviously FLIR, also known as the Tic Tac, gimbal, and if I just get rid of my little overlay there for the moment, and Go Fast. Now, why are these three videos important? They may be interesting but not compelling to Mel Hupfeld, but they're certainly compelling to the aviators that observe them, that the personnel that track them on various sensors, and it's also of significant interest to the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, because wouldn't you know it, if you have a look at the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office's website, and despite what feelings folks have about AARO, well, what do we see? We see, those three at the bottom, still unresolved cases. Tic Tac, so FLIR, gimbal, and Go Fast, still unresolved. AARO has not currently reached a conclusion as to what these objects are that was captured on multiple sensors by naval aviators. So if the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office is taking these three case reports very seriously, and they obviously find them compelling enough to investigate them, well, why are they not good enough for the Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Mel Hupfeld? What do you know about these cases that AARO doesn't? You obviously clearly don't know anything other than what you've seen when you looked at them briefly. So I find it very quite absurd, to be perfectly honest, that you haven't even bothered to read any of the official reports that have come out when these three cases are still being investigated by the AARO. So let's now come back to that. I mean, and a few talking points on those three cases too. I mean, look at the Nimitz case of 2004. We know that ORSAP complete. No one's ever seen it. Hasn't seen the light of day. But ORSAP authored a 140-page scientific analysis of the Nimitz incident, the Tic Tac incident. We know that Jay Stratton, who was the director of the UAP task force, authored, I believe, also a shorter report of about 14 pages. And we now know that AARO is still working to resolve those three cases. Now, they may be struggling to resolve them due to a lack of data, but they're still considered unresolved. So, again, why did Air Marshal Mel Hupfeld not even bother to be briefed on UAP, or at least be given an executive summary of what is keeping the US Department of Defense up at night with UAP following the release of ODNI's preliminary assessment on UAP. Now, following the release of this ODNI preliminary assessment in June 2021, and following Mel Hupfeld's testimony at the Senate estimates in October of 2021, in May of the following year, what do we see come out? I was able to secure for release through FOIA, the Australian Freedom of Information Act requests, a Chief of Air Force brief on UAP. Now, this document was prepared, I believe, because the Chief of Air Force was thrown completely off guard with the line of questioning from Senator Whish-Wilson in the months earlier in October. And two, there was a Senate estimates that was coming up probably later in the year in 2022. And you can see what's on this document. You've got strategic narrative, key messages, strategic narrative, talking points. What are some questions that you might get asked at a Senate estimates, and how should you respond appropriately? So the thing that's of interest in this particular document is not just the fact that the Royal Australian Air Force is able to miraculously determine what UAP are likely to be or not likely to be without having even read or seen the classified data within the report that was compiled by the ODNI, hadn't received a briefing at all from the United States, and hadn't investigated the topic since 1996, yet they're able to miraculously determine what UAP are likely to be. Natural or other benign phenomena, anomalies with sensors, maybe human-made technology. UAP could be other nation systems, foreign adversarial systems, excuse me, and the remit of investigating those systems sits with the intelligence community, as it should. Foreign adversarial systems, you want our intelligence community to be keeping a close eye on what our other folks are doing across the pond. But what is interesting in this document is that talking points, if asked the question, as an ally, have the United States offered to or asked to collaborate on UAP investigations? This is a document that is let's pull up the date so you can see 26th of May. This is as at the 26th of May, 2022. No, the United States nor any other nation or ally have requested or offered to collaborate on UAP reporting or investigation. Now, we live in a very different time to when this report was created. And the second one that's important, Defence, being the Australian Department of Defence, has no desire to seek collaboration on this issue. So in other words, move along, folks. There's nothing to see here. We're not interested in the UAP issue. We know it's just sensor errors, it's natural benign phenomena, or it's human technology. There's no possible catch-all other bin that ODNI documented in its preliminary assessment on UAP. So again, unfortunate that the Royal Australian Air Force is just throwing cold water on the topic, despite the fact that they haven't seen any of the classified data that the ODNI has put together in its formal preliminary assessment. So that leads us into, that is pretty much brings us to the end of Mel Hupfeld's tenure. He then transferred command of the Royal Australian Air Force to Air Marshal Robert Chipman in July of 2022. And so now we fast forward to the 9th of November of 2022, where again, Senator Whish-Wilson continued his line of questioning on UAP in an Australian context, and now pressed the current Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, on his understanding of UAP in an Australian context, and if he's been keeping up to date with what's happening in the US, and why Australia is not considering implementing comparable reporting mechanisms that the US has implemented. So watch this exchange, and then we'll talk about it.
A year ago, I asked previous Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Hupfeld about the release of a US Defence Intelligence report, or a preliminary report on UAPs, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. And I've just got some follow-up questions for you. There's obviously been a lot happening in this space in the last 12 months, and of course you've taken over the role. Just to fill you in briefly, following the release of that preliminary assessment by the Office Director of National Intelligence, there was a defence legislation amendment in December of 2021 that required the ODNI organisation to report to Congress every year on any updates in relation to UAP. There was a series of congressional hearings in May this year, and then only a few weeks ago, NASA set up their UAP study team or task force. And I was hoping by the time I got to ask you these questions, they may have released their first preliminary assessment to Congress, which was due last week, but we are waiting for that. So with that kind of timeline, that rough timeline used as context, could I just ask you, since you've taken over as Chief of Air Force, in what capacity, if any at all, have you been briefed on the UAP phenomena since you've taken over the role in July?
Senator, I haven't had any specific briefings in relation to UAP since I've taken over.
Okay. Have you followed it on a personal level, just as a matter of interest?
I do not follow it on a personal level.
Follow it on a personal level? Okay.
So again, you've got more than a year later and the Chief of Air Force still has not been briefed on UAP. You are the one that is you're leading the discussion on UAP related matters. You're fronting up at a Senate estimates to answer questions about UAP in Australian context, and you haven't even been briefed on UAP when a year and a half ago, ODNI have released its preliminary assessment on UAP, clearly stating that UAP pose a safety of flight risk and national security threat. Then you have a historic hearing in the United States Congress in May of 2022, again, reiterating that UAP clearly pose a national security threat and safety of flight risk. And then, several months thereafter, at Senate estimates, you ask questions about, have you been briefed on UAP? And you haven't. Why not? Why have you not been briefed on the potential risks that UAP pose in an Australian context when we've now know and we've heard time and time again that UAP are not just an issue that's isolated to the United States? I feel like you're really not doing your job there. You're doing a bit of a disservice to the brave men and women at the front lines of not just the Royal Australian Air Force, but all men and women that serve in the Australian Defence Force. If they're seeing things in Australian airspace that they can't identify or reconcile, and they're not reporting it out of fear of stigma, and you haven't even bothered to be briefed on UAP, that's a problem. That is a big problem. So let's now use that as context to fast forward the clock to only a few months after. That was the 9th of November of 2022. And so what comes out on the 12th of January of 2023? Well, ODNI now publishes its annual report, its 2022 report on UAP. So the conversation is only getting bigger and the snowball is only gathering speed and getting larger and larger. And yet the Chief of Air Force continues to bury his head in the sand that UAP is an issue worthy of Australia's consideration and time. So what are some of the key takeaways from the ODNI's annual report, 2022 annual report? Well, again, UAP events continue to occur in restricted or sensitive airspace, highlighting possible concerns for safety of flight or adversary collection activity. So it's not going away. It's only continuing to be identified and reported, and the issue is worsening. So let's come on down to a few other talking points that I've highlighted. Flight safety concerns and health implications. Health implications. UAP pose a safety of flight and collision hazard to air assets, potentially requiring aircraft operators to adjust flight patterns in response to their unauthorized presence in the airspace, operating outside of air traffic control standards and instruction. So again, you had reports of 11 near misses in ODNI's preliminary assessment, and that was reiterated at the congressional hearing of May of 2022. And the Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, hasn't even bothered to be briefed on UAP when Australia is the closest ally to the United States, our Five Eyes partner and AUKUS partner. And as at this point in time of 9th of November 2022, our Chief of Air Force, our Airspace Controller Authority, has not even been briefed on UAP. Shameful. UAP continue to represent a hazard to flight safety and pose a possible adversary collection threat. AARO, as a result of all of these reports, the AARO, All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, has been established as the Department of Defense focal point for UAP. So a dedicated investigatory body, congressionally mandated to investigate the extent and nature of UAP and how can we mitigate the risks that UAP pose. Coordinated efforts between DOD, the IC intelligence community, and other government agencies collect and report UAP events have resulted in increased data sets spanning multiple security domains. So they're obviously getting more data that is going to assist them in the analysis of UAP to get to the bottom of what it is, its source, its intent, and how we can mitigate the threats that UAP pose. I think that's everything that I wanted to share with you. One other thing, we'll come back to that one. We'll come back to this document in just a short while. But again, this kind of just reiterates how ridiculous it is that our Chief of Air Force had not even been briefed on UAP when the issue is only getting taken more seriously by the United States. So let's now fast forward to another exchange. Well, actually, wasn't. No, this is probably the one we want to showcase. So this is another exchange between Senator Peter Whish-Wilson and the Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, at that Senate estimates briefing on the 9th of November 2022. And then we'll talk about it once we've played it.
At the US congressional hearing on UAP back in May, the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, Scott Bray, confirmed that since the release of this preliminary report in 2021, they now had 400 case reports they were considering. Most of them were for pilots like yourself. And he was quoted at those hearings as saying the US had brought many allies and international partners into their discussions on UAPs. Given how close we are to the US, has there been any discussions with Australian intelligence services or the Air Force in relation to their approach to this?
I'm not aware of any formal discussions that we've held with the US.
So you're not aware. Is that means that it just hasn't come across your desk, or
I imagine it would have come across my desk if those discussions were held in the last 4 months, but I can take on notice and see if there's any other discussions that have been held.
Thank you.
So there you go, and some perfectly on points there from data derivations and from Jimmy. I'll pull those up again. You know, how can anyone in charge of air-related events on behalf of Australia not be interested in them and not look out for them in both a professional and private capacity? No wonder citizens are filling the void. It's a good point. And Jimmy's comments, personally, I think part of the reason is Australia's total lack of reporting and dismissal of the whole topic is we are just following Big Brother and everything they do, waiting for answers. Yep, sitting kind of waiting in the wings, you know, when it's, acceptable for Australia to formally engage more frequently and more diligently on the topic. But I suspect things have changed. We're probably at a different place now in 2024 to where we were at the time of this hearing, 2022, and you'll see that progression, that evolution as we go through today. So you saw that exchange there between Whish-Wilson and Chipman, again asking if there's been any discussions with the US on UAP. And there hasn't. Well, why not? Why haven't there been any discussions with the US? Have you bothered to reach out to your US counterpart, the equivalent Chief of Air Force for the United States Air Force, and ask them what their pilots are doing to report observations of UAP? Well, clearly you haven't. And what's interesting is at the congressional hearing in May of 2022, Scott Bray, who kind of headed up the UAP task force as it was transitioning to the AIM SOG, kind of in that, before the implementation of AARO. He and Ronald Moultrie, they've both since left their positions, obviously, that are UAP related. I think Moultrie's since retired. Bray's moved on to other things. But Scott Bray said this at the hearing.
Effort to assemble subject matter experts from across the Department of Defense and the intelligence community and other U.S. government agencies and departments. We forged partnerships with the research, development, and acquisition communities, with industry partners, and with academic research labs, and we brought many allies and international partners into our discussions on UAP.
Well, that's interesting. Who are those allies specifically, Scott Bray? Can you give us a sense? Now, I've tried to track down through FOIA just exactly which allies of the United States there's been engagement with. And the only country that we know up until this point that there was engagement with was Canada. But you've got Scott Bray saying that many allies have been brought in discussions, and you've got the Chief of Air Force in Australia saying that Australia's had no briefings whatsoever on UAP. So could it be that Australia hasn't been briefed, which would be weird considering we're a Five Eyes ally, or have we been briefed and good old mate Chipman doesn't know about it, or he does, and he's or deliberately doesn't know about it, and in an effort to use the plausible deniability card. We'll talk more about potential briefings by the US with allies later in this episode. But if we pull up ODNI's annual report, which I just looked at a second ago, well, it's reiterated in this report. I'll just come down to the commentary that I've highlighted in green here. Partnerships and collaborations. ODNI and AARO are committed to the responsible sharing of UAP findings with interagency partners such as the FAA and NASA, other stakeholders, congressional oversight, international partners, and the public. So this was 2022. So as early as May 2022, you've got Scott Bray saying that many international and many allies and international partners have been brought into discussions. And then the ODNI's 2022 annual report saying ODNI and AARO have maintained communication with our allied partners regarding UAP, keeping them informed of developments and US initiatives. So if Australia is in that list, well, Robert Chipman certainly doesn't know a thing about it. And if that's the case, then that is a real problem. The plausible deniability card is no longer a valid excuse. I think that is ridiculous for someone to play that card if that's what's taking place here. Now, I suspect that might be the case. And again, I'm going to show you some other documentation that may point to the fact that Australia had been briefed well and truly before AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP, which was May of last year. So that leads us to specifically that point. Was Australia briefed on UAP prior to AARO's Five Eyes inaugural UAP caucus working group meeting, which we know took place at the Pentagon on the 24th of May of last year? So only recently, my good pal, John Greenwald Jr., and I'll just move on to away from those slides. So John Greenwald recently, this is only a couple of days ago, a few weeks back on the 11th of this month, he released new documents. He was able to secure for release new documents through FOIA pertaining to email exchanges between the UAP task force and NASA. Now, I'm not going to read through the entire article, but I've linked it in the show notes below. So if you want to have a read of a summary of John's findings, you absolutely can. The article is on his website, The Black Vault. But I'll just call attention, and he also did a deep dive on these documents in a recent live stream, and then he kind of polished it off in an edited version. So you can watch the video via the article if you're interested. It does a really good deep dive. But this is what I find interesting. If I just do a little search here, if I can get it to work. There we go. Another notable section in the documents that John was able to secure release through FOIA discusses the use of multiple sensors in detecting UAPs. According to the slide, which you'll see in just a moment, the UAP TF, the UAP task force, employs a combination of technologies and reporting from operators to track and analyze UAPs. The multi-sensor approach is essential for corroborating sightings and gathering reliable data, which is then shared with other US government partners for further analysis. Now, if we look at the documents that John was able to secure for release through FOIA, I'll pull this up for you. It's a very interesting one because, and I'll go straight to the slide deck. This is the documentation that John received, and this is John's. This isn't doxing John. He has had his address information published on a lot of his documents. So if we come to the documents, I won't go through the email chain. I'll go straight to the slide deck. Let me zoom out a bit. It's a bit too close here. So this is a slide deck that was produced by the director of the UAP task force in 2020, the 31st of August, 2020. Director of the UAP task force then was Jay Stratton, who we know. Now, if we come on down, this is a key document. Now, I'll come back to that. There's a lot of redactions through here. It talks about the 3 videos that we've all seen. So again, the UAP task force is taking these 3 cases as compelling enough to investigate them, yet our good mate Mel Hupfeld isn't. And we can also see that there is the current assessment, as at the 31st of August of 2020, was that UAP-TF determined that potential explanations, 1, redacted for national security reasons, 2, unknown weather or natural phenomena, or 3, B5, I think is deliberations. I'm not too sure of the exemption there, but they're telling us only one of the possible 3 explanations. Now, again, the Royal Australian Air Force, in that document I showed you earlier, had magically come to the conclusion that UAP are probably natural or other benign phenomena, sensor errors, or human-made technologies. Now, could that be what 1 and 3 are? I don't know, but it's interesting that they both list only 3 options. Anyway, coming back to this key slide that I wanted to show you, this is the key one, because there's a lot of information that is of interest on this particular slide. Obviously goes into a summary about, that UAPs reported with the United States and around the world. So again, not isolated to the United States, represents safety of flight, national security. We use reporting from operator interactions to Q various and other advanced means of tracking analysis. The UAPTF uses a combination of subject matter expertise and specialized tools to identify, collect, investigate, report on these contacts. The result of the data are used to, redacted, inform other US government partners and develop concepts for addressing the problem. Stigmas associated with reporting UAP. Folks don't want to be known as the UFO guy or the tinfoil hat guy, redacted for national security, and they don't want to lose training. This is what I find is incredibly interesting, though, and I'll zoom this in on the far right of screen so you can see it. Partners, all of the key stakeholders of the UAP task force to help better understand the extent and nature of UAP. US partners, different services, law enforcement, intelligence community. B1, I suspect, might be the CIA or the Department of Energy. Redacted for national security and others. Now, I have a strong suspicion that I know what that B1 exemption is. And I'm not the only one that has a sneaking suspicion, because John actually talks about this in the deep dive that he did of this document. And I'll play this for you now and let him disclose what he thinks, which I imagine many of you think as well.
Lines separated from IC, so probably not other government agencies, but what here is also redacted for national security. I was just going to mention you, Grant Lavac. I see you in the chat that this is potentially a reference to the Five Eyes Alliance, maybe something like that. Grant, always good to see you, bud. And others, industry / academia. So
we reached the same conclusion that it's more than likely, again, this is 31st of August of 2020, that the UAP task force is potentially indicating there that allies and international partners of the United States are key stakeholders on this discussion. And the Five Eyes would be, one would think, an appropriate intelligence alliance to be sharing that information with. And we know that's true now because AARO held its Five Eyes Forum on UAP, its first, only last year. So is it possible that the UAP task force had briefed Australia, a representative from the Australian Department of Defense, on UAP, and yet both Mel Hupfeld and Robert Chipman haven't even been briefed by the US on UAP, haven't seen any of the reports, and don't know if Australia, and are pretty confident and declarative that Australia has not had an engagement with the United States. You saw that in that document I showed you earlier. Australia hasn't been briefed by the United States. And then Robert Chipman is reiterating that again in his testimony. So what exactly is going on here? So that leads us to a follow-up video. In that 9 November 2022 hearing, Senator Whish-Wilson then asks Robert Chipman another key question. And let me play this one for you.
Being a pilot yourself, when our military aviators or defence personnel spot something they don't understand or can't identify in our airspace, what encouragement and reporting mechanisms are afforded to the men and women of the ADF in relation to that?
Senator, we have a really strong reporting culture. If there's anything related to safety or airworthiness issues, then we strongly encourage our pilots to report those. There's also mechanisms through standard operational means, our air traffic control, and also our air defence personnel who maintain constant surveillance of our airspace.
Strong reporting culture are the words that Robert Chipman used. We have a very strong reporting culture and 24/7 continuous monitoring of our airspace. Well, let's test that. Let's test that statement that Robert Chipman has made, because if I pull up another document for you that I was able to secure for release through the Australian Freedom of Information Act, I think this is the right one. It is. So this is a FOIA document. And look what it says here. Process protocols to report UAP, UFO in Australian airspace. There has been no records of observations of sightings of unidentified aircraft over the past 10 years. Well, again, no reporting protocols. You're not going to get many reports, I wouldn't think. There is no specific encouragement given to pilots to report aircraft that they cannot identify. So I'm not surprised that there are no reports of unidentified aircraft in the last 10 years. There's no encouragement, there's no motivation, incentive for people to report, and there's no mechanisms for them to report UAP. Maybe there is for unidentified aircraft, and we'll come to that. So that there's no specific encouragement given to pilots to report aircraft they cannot identify. But apparently there's a very strong reporting culture within the Australian Air Force. So a little bit of a contrast with that testimony there from Robert Chipman and what we can see in documents. Now, I've long attempted to track down and find out, well, what are the reporting mechanisms that are currently in place for, the Royal Australian Air Force? What are the Defence Aviation Safety reporting protocols? What's the Defence Aviation Safety Authority's reporting guidelines? And all I've been able to track down to now is an occurrence report. So this is this is legislated in the Defence Aviation Safety Regulation. This is an occurrence report. Basically, what is a reportable occurrence? Occurrences are defined as an incident, which could be a near miss or a close call, malfunction, defect, technical defect, or exceedance of limitations that endangers or could endanger, that's the key one, or could endanger the safe operation of aircraft and must be reported to the authority. Well, we know from ODNI's preliminary assessment and what they stated, Moultrie and Bray stated in the congressional hearing in May 2022, that there have been 11 near misses with UAP. Safety of flight risk. That is that endangers or could endanger the safe operation of aircraft. So there is an occurrence report that folks can complete. Accidents, serious incidents, or voluntary reporting. Now, why would anyone want to volunteer a report or an observation of UAP when clearly there are no mechanisms in place for UAP reports to be investigated? The Department of Defense says there are no specific UAP reporting or recording protocols, and you have such reluctance from the Chief of Air Force, Mel Hupfeld, and Robert Chipman to even be briefed on UAP. That sends the message, my thinking is that sends the message to men and women in the Royal Australian Air Force that our Chief of Air Force, our leader, is not taking the issue of UAP seriously when our Five Eyes ally, the United States, is. So why on earth would I report UAP when I'm only going to get shut down and I'm going to get ridiculed for even raising an awareness of the safety of flight risks that UAP pose? So I've only been able to track down occurrence reporting to date. Now that's changed only in the last month. I was able to let me pull up this next document for you. We'll stay in the vein of reporting. And great to see Parsi, good to see you, my friend. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to join and say good day. Always good to see folks that I don't see too often in the live chat. So let me pull up this next document. So this is, I just want to make sure we're at the right one here. We are. So this is an updated version of the Chief of Air Force brief on UAP, or a Senate estimates brief. So to prepare the Chief of Air Force for potential questions that he might get asked by Senator Whish-Wilson or other senators on UAP. And this is as of February of this year. And I'm only using this one as an example. Existing defense procedures and mechanisms already enable the reporting of all aerial unidentified anomalous phenomena. Really? Well, voluntary reporting is the only thing that I've seen on the occurrence report, and an incident, maybe if there's a near miss. But what if it's simply an observation of a UAP that could potentially endanger safety of flight? Talking points. There are well-established procedures utilized by military and civilian air traffic controllers and aircrew for the management and reporting of airspace infringements. That is the unauthorized entry of an aircraft into airspace that is either prohibited or where clearance is required, and unknown aircraft. There are also equally well-established military and civilian mechanisms for the reporting of incidents that pose a risk to aviation safety. Defense takes all threats to aviation safety or national security very seriously. Yet the Chief of Air Force hasn't even been briefed on UAP. I find that a bit disingenuous. And has continuous reviews of our reporting systems to ensure they remain suitable. Noting the multiple reporting mechanisms already in place, there would need to be UAP reporting of sufficient volume and credibility to justify consideration of allocating resources to establish a body similar to the AARO in the Australian context. Well, what would that threshold be? What is sufficient volume of reports and the credibility of those reports to justify implementation of a comparable body to that of AARO to investigate UAP in Australian context? So they're clearly saying, and this document reiterates the Chief of Air Force's comments there, that, yeah, we've already got reporting protocols in place that are sufficient to capture UAP. Well, I don't think the occurrence report is sufficient because it's voluntary reporting on UAP. And why would anyone want to volunteer report when they know the Chief of Air Force hasn't even been briefed on UAP? So let's now fast forward to, this is a brand new FOIA document that I secured for release only recently. This is this was the request that I made in July of this year. I wanted to know specifically, based on what I just read, well, what are those well-established reporting protocols and mechanisms that are in place. So I kindly requested copies of current defense policy manuals documents, procedure manuals documents, and reporting forms that relate to the management and reporting of airspace infringements. That is the unauthorized entry of an aircraft into airspace that is prohibited, either prohibited or where clearance is required, and unknown aircraft. And I received one document falling within the scope of that request. So what was that document? Well, let me show you. So this is the document that I secured for release only recently. And it's a bit of a short one, unfortunately, and I'll zoom on in for you. Now, the S22 is just irrelevant to the scope of my request. Where an airspace infringement has occurred, ATC, which I take as air traffic control, is to be requested to raise the ASR, which is aviation safety reporting, unless the infringing unit is a locally based aviation unit. In this case, it will be raised by the local unit after liaison with ATC. This will allow the event to be reviewed at the Aviation Safety System Safety Committee meeting and provide awareness of local airspace issues. For events that involve external agencies, ATC are to be requested to provide details of the incident to, I'm not sure what that acronym, for the Safety Committee's review. So it didn't really give me a whole lot in that document, but in the email that I received from the FOIA team, it included some additional supporting information. And so this was the response that I received from the FOIA case management team, saying, please find attached the decision and document pertaining to your request. The publicly available document mentioned in paragraph 13 of the statement of reasons, which I didn't read, but there is a publicly available document, can be accessed via the following link. Now, I was only aware of occurrence reports prior to this release. So what is that Aviation Safety Reporting and Investigations Guidebook? So let me pull up, this is a publicly available document, and I was quite interested to read through it. So let me zoom on in so it's a bit easier on the eyes there. So this is a pretty comprehensive document. It's about 70 pages long, and this guidebook has been designed to assist individuals involved in the initial review and investigation of aviation safety reports. And I'm just pulling out you can see it's how many pages. It's a pretty chunky document, 67 pages. What is the purpose of aviation safety reporting? It focuses on the risk to people arising from aircraft operations and encompasses both the manner in which aircraft are flown and the tasks, activities, and management systems whose primary purpose is to enable safe flight. Why is it important to have a just culture, a strong reporting culture, as Chipman testified? Valuable safety reporting is made possible when people are willing to report observations and errors because the organization guarantees an objective, fair, accountable, and learned response. What is the difference between a safety event and a safety issue? Now, safety event, an aviation safety event is defined as an event where an aviation system, including the human element, fails to perform in the expected manner and adversely affects or could have adversely affected at the time the safety of or airworthiness of an aviation system or third party. But what's probably more appropriate is aviation safety issue. A safety issue is basically the highlighted part, a series of aviation safety events that suggest an area of vulnerability. A safety issue can be raised as an operational hazard report. Now, where have we heard something similar to an operational hazard report? Well, Ryan Graves has said that when his aviators observed the Go Fast and the gimbal event, they were so concerned with what they were seeing. What did they do? There was no UAP reporting protocol, so they submitted hazard reports. So there are operational hazard reports available. Who can submit an aviation safety report? Anyone in defense aviation who is involved in, witnesses, or is notified of a safety event or issue may initiate an aviation safety report. What must be reported? There is currently no prescribed list of specific occurrences that are required to be reported through the ASR system. So UAP would not be defined And we know it's not because Defence told us that there's no current reporting protocols on UAP. What should be reported? Individuals are encouraged, yet there's no specific encouragement provided to report observations of aircraft people can't identify. Individuals are encouraged to report safety-related information which they perceive as having safety significance, an actual or potential hazard to aviation safety. Go fast, gimbal, tic-tac. As a general guide, if there is doubt as to whether an ASR is required, a report is to be raised. What are the different types of aviation safety events? Flight operation events are those aviation safety events that have or could have a direct safety impact on an aircraft, a UAP, potentially could be a near miss, that occurred during activities associated with flight. Events that impact the aircraft system during the period of time from authorized aircrew or UAS operators that's drone operators taking control of an aircraft to commence a specific mission to their relinquishing control at the cessation of that mission. Events involving external environment and meteorological factors such as wildlife strikes, lightning strikes, and hail encounters. Again, no reference there to anything outside of that, and UAS, which could be drone, which could be commercial or prosumer drones or foreign adversarial drones and so on. Again, nothing that is of the anomalous nature outside of what I've just read. When should an op hazard report be raised? The reporting of potential aviation safety issues, known as operational hazards, provide an additional proactive mechanism for capturing safety information not necessarily associated with an aviation safety event. Safety issues may be identified through many internal sources, including operational experiences and foreign militaries. Now, that's important. Operational experiences, so it could be eyeballs, F-35 pilots that are seeing anomalous objects in Australian airspace and choosing not to report it, and we'll talk about that in a moment, and foreign militaries. That's an important one. Then it talks about the system that's used for the software application that they use for reporting. And so I'm going to bypass a lot of this stuff, but I come down to the role of the aviation reviewer. It is the role of the aviation reviewer to oversee initial review into the event and oversee the initial processing of an aviation safety report in Sentinel, the software application. An ASR must be submitted in Sentinel and progress to the completion of first release within 7 calendar days. So there is a stringent reporting mechanism in place, for accidents, incidents, near misses, those sorts of things, but nothing, again, that has, there's no mention of anything in the way of anomalous phenomena or anything of that sort. So when it is being documented, when a report is being documented in this Sentinel system, what do you need to include in your report? Well, you've got to describe what happened. Short description or describing where it happened and what happened in the result. The description should contain where it happened, what happened, and what was the result. What is also interesting in this document is if we come on down, near miss must be reported. And when the report is being submitted in this Sentinel system, you've got to ensure that all involved aircraft are included. There may be multiple aircraft involved. If the aircraft type is unknown, now does that extend to UAP? Potentially, I don't know. If the aircraft type is unknown, you can see there's option 2, unknown aircraft, semicolon unknown. Select 2, unknown aircraft, unknown. So I just found that interesting that there is a classification in this reporting system that is used by the Royal Australian Air Force and Defence Aviation to document unknown aircraft and unknown. So I'd be interested to see how many reports there are in the last 10 years that have a category of unknown documented, and if those unknowns were anomalous, what the descriptions were. But they've, the Royal Australian Air Force is saying they haven't There have been no reports of unidentified aircraft in the last 10 years. Unknown aircraft. Well, what about unknown other potential objects? I just found that interesting. So it raises the question, well, is this current mechanism that is in place to capture accidents, incidents, safety events, safety incidents, is that sufficient to capture reports of UAP? Well, by the sounds of what one of those categories is in there, it's possible, but there's no investigatory body that is currently in place to assess any reports of UAP. And they said that we would need sufficient volume and credibility of reports to implement a body that's going to assess, investigate UAP. So again, it's kind of, we've got this strong reporting culture, yet you have anecdotal evidence of folks that are reluctant to submit reports. And then those reports won't get formally documented in the Sentinel system because folks aren't coming forward. And evidence of that is our next clip. So I want to show you, let me just come to our next document. So again, why would someone that is a pilot or someone in the Defence Force that observes a UAP, and there have been reports that UAP have been observed by personnel in the Australian Defence Force. We've heard that time and time again in Ross Coulthart's reporting. Well, why would anyone want to come forward with a report when they know that the Chief of Air Force hasn't even been briefed on UAP? Mel Hupfeld didn't even read ODNI's preliminary assessment. He was caught completely off guard with a line of questioning. And then this is the kind of, stigma and derision that plagues folks in leadership within the Australian Defence Force. This is an email from the 13th of May, 2022. In the lead up, just days before the congressional hearing in the US, there was an article that calls out AUKUS, the Australian, UK, US alliance, directly regarding a more collaborative approach to the UAP conversation. Sir, all jokes aside, I think this might end up causing us some work. The response to that email from the Director, Space Coordination Engagement, Strategic Plans Branch, the Australian Defence Space Command, which fell under the remit of RAAF up until, I think, last year. You're right, it may trigger more UFO-flavoured interest. The truth is out there. I'll just need to determine if interest in this sci-fi is an HAC, Head of Air Force Capability, or Defence Space Command or Commander of the Defence Space Command lead. So again, you've got, the topic is just being shat on and treated with derision and ridicule, even within commentary, within people in positions of leadership in Defence Space Command and the Royal Australian Air Force. So if pilots catch wind of that, why are they going to submit a report when they know that's the position of leadership and others within positions of authority within the Australian Defence Force? No matter how good your strong reporting culture is, if you've got stigma and ridicule that plagues the conversation of UAP, you're not going to get anyone that's going to want to report on it. And that's true, and you'll see that in just a moment. So let's now use that as an opportunity to pull up this brief comment from Ross Coulthart. This was October of last year when he was doing a Q&A event in Sydney. And this speaks to the heart of why folks may be reluctant to report observations of UAP in Australian airspace. And we'll talk about it on the other side.
A guy contacted me who was an F-35 pilot inside the Australian Air Force. And I'm probably revealing that he's one of, a couple of dozen guys in that conversation. But he wanted me to know that he'd seen anomalous phenomena. And I said to him, will you report this to your bosses? Because they're saying that they've got no evidence. And he said, what do you think? What do you think somebody like me should do when the head of my Air Force is telling a parliamentary committee that there is no evidence? He said, I'm getting the message that I shouldn't come forward with that evidence. This is the problem, is that there needs to be a free, open, transparent, unpressurised airing of this evidence, because there are so many people out there who want to provide evidence who feel intimidated about doing so.
So there you go. So that is exactly the point that I was making. Perhaps the Chief of Air Force should then re-examine that statement that he made, that we have a strong reporting culture that he referred to, because the conversations that Ross Coulthart is having with Australian F-35 pilots tells a very different story. And so a question that I would have for the new Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Stephen Chappell, is, number one, are you aware of Australian F-35 pilots coming forward and talking about their observations of UAP in Australian airspace and not feeling comfortable to report that to their higher-ups because of the previous statements of the Chief of Air Force, the current positions of the Royal Australian Air Force? And does that concern you? If so, then you need to kind of review your policies and protocols internally and maybe do an investigation to get a better understanding of, well, how many anecdotal reports are there of UAP by Australian Defence Force, and does that justify the implementation of UAP reporting protocols, which are now mandatory for personnel within the US Department of Defense? I think that would be a good point of call, because you're saying that there have been no reports of unidentified aircraft for the last 10 years. We've got a really strong, good reporting culture, yet leadership is not taking the issue of UAP seriously, has not been briefed by the US, has not even bothered to read the reports that have been put out by the US. And so perhaps the brave men and women at the front lines of the Royal Australian Air Force know that have seen something and maybe have taken interest in this topic. And they're thinking, well, why am I going to report it if it's not going to be taken seriously? And you've seen evidence of that stigma just in that email that I showed you. So then let's fast forward to another exchange in that same Senate estimates, the 9th of November of 2022, where Senator Whish-Wilson asked this question of Air Marshal Robert Chipman.
The congressional hearings on UAP in May, the same Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence stated Navy and Air Force crews now have a step-by-step reporting procedure on UAPs on their knee board in the cockpit and in their post-flight debrief procedures. Does that surprise you?
We've seen no reason why we would institute those measures in Australia.
Can you see a reason why would you understand why they are implementing?
No, Senator.
But is there a reason you haven't had a discussion with our chief ally about why they're implementing those procedures? And
I was not aware of those procedures, Senator.
Oh my God, you don't understand why they've implemented mandatory reporting, and you haven't even bothered to reach out to US counterpart to understand why they've implemented those reporting. Well, after that hearing, you knew about the reporting, the mechanisms that had been implemented in the US, because Senator Whish-Wilson just informed you of it. It's pretty appalling that the senator has to inform the chief of the Australian Air Force about what our Five Eyes ally and US partner is doing to address the safety of flight risks and national security threat issues, primarily safety of flight, that UAP pose. And you don't understand why the US have implemented such procedures when the reports that have come out from ODNI have told us time and time again that UAP clearly pose a safety of flight risk. And Scott Bray mentioned that we've brought many allies into the discussions of UAP. What's going on? So let me play this for you, Robert Chipman, as to specifically why the US has implemented knee board reporting for the US Air Force and pilots and naval aviators.
Spent considerable efforts engaging directly with our naval aviators and building relationships to help destigmatize the act of reporting sightings or encounters. And we worked with naval aviation leadership to provide additional equipment to record any encounter. Navy and Air Force crews now have step-by-step procedures for reporting on a UAP on their knee board in the cockpit and in their post-flight debrief procedures. The direct result of those efforts has been increased reporting, with increased opportunities to focus a number of sensors on any objects. The message is now clear. If you see something, you need to report it.
So sadly, Australia is where the US was before it even implemented any of these procedures. What have they seen as a result of these kneeboard reporting, for US Air Force pilots and naval aviators? Reduced stigma, increased reports because there's a reporting mechanism in place. And the Chief of Air Force is saying, we've got a really strong reporting culture. We've got no reports of identified aircraft in the last 10 years, but we don't have any UAP reporting mechanisms. And oh yeah, there's still some stigma associated with the topic. And you've seen that through that email that I just showed you. And you've heard that from Ross Coulthart directly, who's spoken with F-35 pilots. And you'll see that in just a moment in probably the most blatant and frustrating exchange and disappointing exchange that I've ever seen from an Australian politician on this particular topic. Well, maybe Robert Chipman should have taken into greater consideration the joint vision statement that the Royal Australian Air Force agreed to with the US Air Force, because this was a joint vision statement that was executed or signed off on. It's not a formal agreement. It's just this is how we both agree we should be collaborating going forward to, maximize our strengths, work on our vulnerabilities and so on. And so this is a joint vision statement, and both the US Air Force and the Royal Australian Air Force agree that we must enhance the ability of our air forces to simultaneously address today's air power challenges, develop operating concepts and capabilities for tomorrow's emerging threats, and design forces capable of adapting to whatever path the future takes. Well, I would certainly say that UAP is no longer an emerging threat of tomorrow. It's already a threat. It's certainly emerged itself as a safety of flight threat and national security risk. In doing so, and the US Air Force recognizes that because they have now mandatory reporting. They may have been reluctant to implement it because they've been very, very quiet on the UAP topic, but now it is mandatory. It's compulsory for US Air Force, naval aviators, and really anyone within personnel in the US Department of Defense to report UAP. If you see something, you have to report it. In doing so, we must be operationally resilient and capable, and capitalize on collaboration opportunities that we find now, while building our air forces that will remain effective as the future military environment rapidly evolves. Shared approaches to security challenges and collaboration on the effective mix of warfighting capabilities and concepts. We will do this by leveraging open, agile, and frank engagement between our air forces, managed through the Air Senior National Representative Forum. Well, Chipman's saying he hasn't even been briefed by the US on UAP. So what sort of collaboration do you have at all with the United States Air Force that have now implemented mandatory reporting? And you say there's a sense of urgency. We must act quickly to meet the threats to our national security and strategic goals for the region. Well, fair enough. Okay, UAP might not be a strategic goal for the region, but we certainly know it's a national security threat. So you should be acting, at least proactively acting, with a sense of urgency to try and better understand the nature and extent of what the US is facing on UAP, because it is certainly an issue that they're trying to tackle. And they've said time and time again that UAP is not isolated to the United States. So wouldn't that prompt you to maybe do a formal appraisal of reports or anecdotal reports that are not being submitted in Australia due to a lack of reporting protocols and the stigma that exists, the exact same issues that were facing the United States years before ODNI released its preliminary assessment on UAP. So this is the real kicker, though. Let's have a look where we're at. I just want to make sure we're at the right one. That was Scott Bray. Okay. So let's now pull up our next video. This is, again, of Senator Whish-Wilson being asked questions by, Air Marshal Robert Chipman being asked questions by Senator Whish-Wilson on is he aware of incursions by UAP in airspace, training exercises being cancelled and so on?
Incursions in defence training ranges by unidentified objects, intrusions by unknown aircraft or objects would represent serious hazards to the safety of flight and potential threats to security of our operations. You've obviously got strategies in place to do that here. Are you aware of reports? I did raise this with the previous Air Marshal as well, of US military exercises being cancelled because of concerns around air safety and observations of UAPs.
Is this a UFO question?
You could call them a UFO if you like, Senator Wong.
Really?
They're now technically
so just so I'm clear,
unidentified aerial phenomena. What do you think? Do you think it's funny?
I haven't been here for. Well, I don't think I've asked questions about this.
Okay. Well,
that's all right.
Well,
I'm not sure we
am
can.
Asking.
Can we assist at all, the Senator, with this line of questioning?
Senator, what I would say is I'm not aware of that. I am aware that there is reports due in the United States. If there is anything in that reporting that raises anything that would be a concern to us in our airspace, then we'll take that seriously.
Well, number one, you can see there how incredibly disappointing it is that Senator Penny Wong, who's the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, interjected with such ignorance and, derision that how dare UAP be brought up in discussion before Senate estimates, and it's beyond it's beyond us and the Senate estimates to even be talking about it. Well, I'm sorry, Penny Wong, but back then, hopefully you've done your homework since then, but back then you're not at all aware of or educated on the issue, and it's disgraceful that is the response that you would interject with such an ignorant, uneducated, and uninformed position on UAP. When credit, and I applaud Senator Whish-Wilson for being the one that's taking the topic seriously and just going off what the ODNI has formally reported, that UAP present a national security threat, safety of flight risk. Pre-planned training exercises have been cancelled due to incursions by UAP. There have been 11 near misses, and that's been reiterated that was reiterated at the congressional hearing with testimony from Scott Bray and Ronald Moultrie. And then you have the Chief of Air Force saying he's not aware that US training exercises have been cancelled due to incursions by UAP. Well, get off your ass and read the report that ODNI have released, or watch the congressional hearing from 2022. Well, get your staffer to watch it and provide you with an executive summary. But how can you say you're not aware of reports when you've got a Chief of Air Force brief from May 2022 that clearly states, that was prepared for the benefit of Mel Hupfeld, that states everything that's just been indicated? Safety of flight risk. We take safety very seriously. National security threat. How can you be so foolish and not even want to be open to the conversation of UAP when it's clearly an issue for our Five Eyes ally? And you've just signed off on this joint vision statement with the US Air Force, all about collaboration, and we've got to work together, and we've got to be able to address the emerging threats of tomorrow. Well, you're clearly not aware of the fact that UAP has emerged itself as a threat for the United States Department of Defense. And shame on you, Robert Chipman, for not doing your due diligence and doing a disservice to the brave men and women at the front lines of the Royal Australian Air Force that are seeing things that they can't identify in Australian airspace, just like the F-35 pilot or pilots that have spoken directly with Ross Coulthart. Shame on you, and I hope that your successor, Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Stephen Chappell, takes a very different tone, a much more serious, open-minded approach to UAP in Australian airspace. We have Kashi Chris, Mindful. Great to see you, my friend. Thanks for joining in. Some comments from Jasmine. I wonder if his attitude was a reason why he held the position for such a short time. Well, he actually got promoted. He's now the Vice chief of defense force. So I would say that maybe his lack of interest maybe helped him with his job prospects, if there is still stigma and ridicule associated with the UAP topic. So that really boils my blood seeing that clip, because I'm just so frustrated. I do think Penny Wong does a good job, but I'm just so disappointed in her lack of openness and lack of inquiry into the clear and present threats that UAP pose. So let's now move away from that exchange that you've just seen. And actually, I'll just pull up this note from data derivations. No reporting and no compelling self-sustaining hibernation pairs. Should we ask ADF to survey periodically to retest the waters for compelling reason to take you? I think that's a great point. I think that the Royal Australian Air Force needs to do an appraisal or survey, at least get a sample, of, if there are anecdotal reports, are there personnel that are prepared to have a conversation, maybe and remain anonymous if they want the survey responses they provide to be confidential. I think that would be a great way to at least collect some data, these anecdotal reports that we're hearing, because you got, again, people are coming to Ross and saying, look, this is off the record, or I'm not prepared to, I don't want my name out there because I don't want my future employment opportunities to be jeopardized. I think a survey of these anecdotal reports that have been talked about would at least be of value. I think there's an opportunity for a formal assessment to be conducted. I think that's a good point. So let's have a look at now. Go back to now the to the point that I just said there. Robert Chipman's response was that he wasn't aware that pre-scheduled training exercises and military training exercises were being cancelled in the US because of incursions by UAP. But again, if he had even bothered to read the ODNI's 2022 annual report on UAP, the very last page, he would be aware of the fact, let me zoom on in, of what a range fouler is. This report uses the following terms. Range fouler, defined by US Navy aviators based on observations of UAP interrupting pre-planned training or other military activity in military operating areas or restricted airspace. Now, granted, this report didn't come out, I believe, until, when was it? This was annual report for 2022. Now, it came out in January of 2023, but he was still the Chief of Air Force at that point in time. But there was even talk of, pre-planned exercises being cancelled in ODNI's, I think it was back in ODNI's preliminary assessment. Or it might have been this report, I can't recall. But hopefully the Chief of Air Force at least read that report following that 9 November 2022 hearing, because Senator Whish-Wilson was the one that just informed him of it. But it's just so frustrating that this information is all out there and available for the Chief of Air Force to review. Even in the absence of getting a formal briefing from the US, you could have read the executive summary or the reports that had come out. You could have taken received an executive summary of the congressional hearing in May 2022, which talked about pre-planned training exercises being cancelled on those 11 near misses, and range fouler reports. You would know about those as well. We all know about them because, well, from the reporting that's come out of the war zone, actually, I think that was the That was the one I just showed, wasn't it? Yeah. So the War Zone, which was formerly The Drive, put out some great reporting. This was 13th of January of 2023. This was actually just around the time that the ODNI's 2022 annual report, UAP, got released. But it talks about the Tic Tac UAP incident was included in newly released range incursion reports. So again, talking about these range failure reports. And what's interesting, this is the example of the range failure report. And what's interesting, if I zoom on in for you, what's interesting with these range failure reports is this security classification at the top. Again, really hard to see, so let me zoom on in for you. Come back. Might be hard to see there, but it says secret / rel to USA Five Eyes, released to USA and FVEY Five Eyes. So why is that important? Because the redacted documents show that they are all originally classified as secret and were marked with further special instructions to only release them to approved US nationals and those from other 4 countries that make up the Five Eyes intelligence bloc, being Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, and New Zealand. So these range failure reports have been available since 2004. This was specifically the Tic Tac incident, and they're available for release to the Five Eyes. So who within the Australian Department of Defence, or I suspect the intelligence community, has been privy to these range failure reports and knows about range failure reports and didn't bother to provide any of that information or brief the Chief of Air Force, who is the one leading all discussions on UAP-related matters and fronting up before us Senate estimates, answering questions on UAP. It makes no sense to me that the Chief of Air Force not be briefed and not be armed with all the information he needs to address questions rather than just a simple, no, I'm not aware of that, didn't know there was reports, haven't been briefed. It screams plausible deniability to me, but there might be just this ignorance is bliss card is being played time and time again from Mel Hupfeld on to Robert Chipman. And time will soon tell as to the position that the new Chief of Air Force, Stephen Chappell, is going to take on this topic. So the range failure reports have been available for release to the Five Eyes countries since they were created, but that the report was essentially marked with that classification. Let's now go to another video. And I know we've got, again, I said this was a dense, heavy session, folks, so we're still working our way through.
My earlier line of questioning at previous estimates around unidentified aerial phenomena. What we've seen since then, of course, is a task force established in the US. I suppose you could say a heightened level of surveillance following that. The detection of increased anomalous and unidentified or mysterious phenomena. And then in recent weeks, we've seen both the Canadian Prime Minister and a US President authorise that these objects get shot out of the sky. I just wanted to ask whether you have had a chance to have a look at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence report since it's been released.
I have, Senator. I am aware of the report. I'm also aware that the report noted that there are unidentified aerial phenomena, but also noted that they're not of extraterrestrial. There's no evidence of them being extraterrestrial. They just noted the fact that they need to continue to look at the safety and security implications of unidentified objects that are in their sovereign airspace.
So on that question, and I, by the way, never said that they're extraterrestrial, and I don't think anyone involved in the task force has said that either. But they can't be. Many of them can't be identified. Out of the 500 new reportings, and many of them were Air Force pilots like yourself, a number of them were identified, for example, as balloons, and a number of them can't be identified at this point in time. So this is an evidence and science-based process to try and get to the bottom of this issue. I was interested, the US Congress had a briefing today from your equivalent over in the US and a number of other very high-ranking military officials, and whether they're saying this is a matter of international significance, that these objects are, let's say they're balloons or they're potentially surveillance aircraft, that this is an international issue. Have you had any briefings from the UAP task force or the Pentagon in relation to this issue in recent months?
No, Senator.
Has any defence attaches had any?
Senator, we were briefed on the recent incidents that were related to the shoot down of what has been attributed to China's balloon that was over the United States of America. We don't know if we were one of the 40 nations that were referred to in the press briefing, but we have been briefed by the US, and we have sought additional information from them through the defence attaché, the air attaché in Washington.
So specifically in relation to the Chinese surveillance balloon or spy balloon or whatever you want to call it, what about the three other?
We've sought information in
objects?
relation to those 4 incidents, yes, Senator.
Okay, and why have you sought information in relation to those?
Because we would like to know what the source of the unidentified object is. We would like to know what the identity of it is, and we would like to know how the US has responded to it, so that if we had something similar in our airspace, then we can take advantage of the learning from that.
Do you see the hypocrisy there? He just dug a complete hole for himself. Number one, first and foremost, finally, you're aware of ODNI's reports on UAP. The preliminary assessment, 25th of June, 2021, and the annual 2022 report, which came out in 2023. Now, this hearing was the 15th of February, so the report had only come out before. So finally, great that you finally got off your ass and you've read the report. Good job. Wasn't that hard, was it? Number two, why do you have to throw in there the extraterrestrial explanation when that's never been offered by ODNI? Again, I think it kind of tends to point out your bias there and your rush to judgment that UAP, everyone's always going to think it's aliens, it's extraterrestrials. That's one of several possible explanations. But shouldn't you be ticking off every possible prosaic explanation first before you then get to that as the last option? But you've gone straight to the top and you've discounted that at the start, when Senator Whish-Wilson has never once used the word extraterrestrial in any of his line of questioning. ODNI has never included it in any of their reporting, yet you're quick to jump in there and just make it known that, no, it's not ET. Move along, folks. There's nothing to see here. We can all go on down to the pub and enjoy a beer. There's nothing to worry about. But most importantly, again, 2023, and you still haven't been briefed by the United States on UAP. Why the hell not? You're now aware of their reports, but you haven't reached out to your counterpart and requested a briefing on UAP, yet you'll be very quick to do that, request information and a briefing from the United States via the air attaché in Washington, D.C., on the Chinese spy balloon shoot down and the 3 unidentified aerial objects. And why? Because you wanted to identify the source, the intent, the identity, I should say, the source, the identity, and what learnings could be gained from the US response to those incidents and that resulted in the shoot down. Why were they shot down? Because they were a national security threat and safety of flight risk. The exact same risks that UAP pose. And ODNI has told us that. And Bray and Moultrie have told us that time and time again. Congressmen and women have said that time and time again. Kirkpatrick has even said that time and time again, that UAP, whatever they are, represent a safety of flight risk and national security threat. Yet you still haven't requested a briefing from the United States on UAP. But you will for the Chinese spy balloon and those 3 other maybe prosaic objects if they were. Why the hypocrisy? And you buried yourself in a hole there. You dug yourself in a hole, and we could all see it when you kind of, put your head into your hand there. So incredibly frustrating that is the double standard that's being played by the leader of the Royal Australian Air Force. and it's just so frustrating. And that's probably a good segue into this next clip from that same hearing. This was again, this is now on the 15th of February of 2023. Actually, before I play this one, let me just show you, to reiterate, that why the Chinese spy balloon and those 3 unidentified aerial objects, which still remain unidentified. We've only seen photographic evidence now of one of them, the shoot down of the Yukon, Canada incident, thanks to the good reporting of Daniel Otis. But why were they shot down? Well, who better to explain why than the President of the United States himself?
To take down these 3 objects due to hazards to civilian commercial air traffic and because we could not rule out the surveillance risk of sensitive facilities. We acted in consultation with the Canadian government. I spoke personally with Prime Minister Trudeau from Canada on Saturday. And just as critically, we acted out of an abundance of caution and an opportunity that allowed us to take down these objects safely. Our military and the Canadian military are seeking to recover the debris so we can learn more about these 3 objects. Our intelligence community is still assessing all 3 incidences. They're reporting to me daily and will continue their urgent efforts to do so, and I will communicate that to the Congress. We don't yet know exactly what these 3 objects were, but nothing right now suggests they were related to China's spy balloon program or that they were surveillance vehicles from any other country. The intelligence community's current assessment is that these 3 objects were most likely balloons tied to private companies, recreation or research institutions studying weather or conducting other scientific research. When I came into office, I instructed our intelligence community to take a broad look at the phenomenon of unidentified aerial objects. We know that a range of entities, including countries, companies, and research organizations, operate objects at altitudes for purposes that are not nefarious, including legitimate scientific research. I want to be clear. We don't have any evidence that there has been a sudden increase in the number of objects in the sky. We're now just seeing more of them, partially because the steps we've taken to increase our radars, to narrow our radars. And we have to keep adapting our approach to dealing with these challenges. That's why I've directed my team to come back to me with sharper rules for how we will deal with these unidentified objects moving forward, distinguishing between those that are likely to pose safety and security risks that necessitate action and those that do not. But make no mistake, if any object presents a threat to the safety and security of the American people, I will take it down.
So there you go. Why were they shot down? Out of an abundance of caution. National security threat, safety of flight risk. Well, maybe, Robert Chipman, out of an abundance of caution, you should have been briefed by the US on the safety of flight risk and national security threats that UAP pose, just like the US is doing its due diligence and scrutiny of the reports that are coming in. Reporting bias, sure. Reporting mechanisms lead to increased reports. We currently have no reporting mechanisms in place, and there's a stigma and degree of ridicule associated with the topic. So why would anyone want to report an observation of UAP in Australian airspace? So again, maybe out of an abundance of caution, you should try a little bit harder and do your due diligence and request a formal briefing from the United States rather than just read ODNI's report. You'll happily seek a briefing from the US on the Chinese spy balloon and the unidentified aerial objects, which we still don't know what they are, but I'm sure that the US Department of Defense and the Australian Department of Defense know what they are, maybe prosaic in nature. But things that are a little bit more anomalous that aren't identified and could, be beyond the scope of just your normal, natural or other benign phenomena or human technologies, out of an abundance of caution, wouldn't it be worth your while to try and seek more information and see what potential considerations there are for an Australian airspace? I think there would be value in seeking a briefing from the United States on that. So let's now have a look at another clip from the 15 February 2023 Senate estimates hearing, where Senator Whish-Wilson doubled down on his line of questioning about have there been any briefings from the UAP task force or the US's. It was in the transitional period, moving to it obviously moved from the UAP TEF to AMSOG and then on to obviously AARO. So this was the exchange.
In terms of the UAP task force, has any, for example, defence attachés in Washington had any briefings in the last 12 months around the establishment of this task force, separate to the issues that we've seen?
No, Senator.
No briefings at all?
No, Senator.
No briefings at all. Yet we know from the documents that John Greenwater was able to secure for release through FOIA that slide that Jay Stratton authored more than likely has allies or international partners or Five Eyes on that stakeholder slide, who the partners are. We know that Scott Bray testified publicly that he brought many allies and international partners into discussions, brought many of them into discussions on UAP. And now we have this from Ross Coulthart only the day before this Senate estimates hearing. The hearing was on the 15th of February of last year. This was from Ross Coulthart on the 14th of February of last year on Sky News. And I think you'll be very interested if you've not seen this before.
President Biden, since mid-2021, has been insisting that UAPs are front and centre in presidential briefings. So the United States sees this now as a priority. And I have to say, I do think it's a concern that the official position from the Australian Defence Department is UAPs are not an issue here down under, because I can tell you, Ashley, I have spoken to jet fighter pilots, military cargo pilots, military reconnaissance pilots, civilian pilots, all of whom are telling me that they're seeing this phenomena down under as well. And there's a real concern that they don't feel confident about coming forward with this information, because the official position from the Chief of Air Staff, the Chief of Defence Force, is that we're not interested in UAPs. And it has to be asked, why? Because the United States has told me they are now engaging with Australia as an ally, inviting it to collaborate with them on UAPs. And I am told that there were oral briefings given by the UAP task force, a Pentagon office, to the defence attachés of Australia at the US Embassy in Washington, D.C. on UAPs. So I think Australia needs to be a lot more open about the fact that there is a mystery phenomenon being detected in our skies. I know for a fact it's being picked up at the Pine Gap facility in the centre of Australia, probably the most important American base outside of the continental USA. And I think at some stage, Australia is going to have to be dragged kicking and screaming, just like America, to acknowledging that there is a new reality in our skies of UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena. We don't know what they are. We're not saying they're alien, but whatever they are, they do need to be investigated.
Well said, Ross. Couldn't put it better than that. And this is, remember, this is months before AARO had its inaugural Five Eyes UAP caucus working group meeting. This is February, months before that took place. And Ross is saying that he has been told by his sources that the director of the UAP task force briefed representatives of Australia, he said the defense attaché in Washington, D.C., on UAP. Now, if true, and I have absolutely no reason to believe that it's not true, why is it that the Chief of Air Force does not know about briefings that Australian defence personnel have received from the UAP task force? You're the lead on all discussions UAP in Senate estimates. You're the one that's fronting up and answering these questions, testifying before senators, Senator Whish-Wilson, about Australia's efforts, involvement, awareness, knowledge, policies, procedures on UAP. And you're not aware that Australia has already been briefed on UAP? Why? Is it ignorance? Is it plausible deniability? Is that you're so quick to just jump to the conclusion that everyone thinks it's ET, it's not ET? Well, like Ross said, we're not saying it's ET. We don't know what it is. All I want as an Australian is for my Australian Department of Defence to acknowledge that UAP is real, to investigate it, to get off its ass and investigate it by way of implementing formal reporting and recording procedures, and have a process in place where reports can be reviewed, assessed, analysed, and resolved. And we want a conclusion to be drawn as to what UAP are. Is that too much to ask? I don't think it is. And regardless of the reason, if it's ignorance is bliss, plausible deniability, you think there's nothing to it, move along, folks, there's nothing to see here. It's a massive concern when the Chief of Air Force, again, is leading on all UAP matters for the Australian Department of Defence and fronting up to answer these questions before a Senate estimates on Australia's current engagement and position on UAP. If there's anyone that has a need to know, it's the Chief of Air Force, because he's the one that's being asking questions about it. And so let's consider, well, if Australia was briefed well and truly before AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP, what could that potentially be about? So let's have a look at now. This was a document that was secured for release through FOIA from someone who I failed to recall exactly who, but they were able to secure for release the organizational chart of the UAP task force as at March 2021. And if I zoom on in for you, and who do we know that was at the very top? Scott Bray was, again, the one that he wasn't the director of the UOPTF, but the UOPTF director reported to the deputy director of the NIA. I can't remember the acronym, and that individual reported to Scott Bray. Now, Scott Bray, again, was the one that said we have brought many allies and international partners into discussions on UAP. So who is this individual? Ross said it was the UAP director that had briefed the Australian Defence Attaché, or could be a representative from the Australian Department of Defence. Maybe it wasn't Defence Attaché, maybe it was another department, and we'll get into that in a moment. So who is this individual? Well, we know, thanks to, and I'll give him credit here, thanks to the reporting of Stephen Greenstreet, we know that Jay Stratton concluded his tenure as director for the UAP task force in January of 2021. Now, this is March of 2021, and the individual that succeeded Jay Stratton, we know, was Brennan McKernan. And Ross's reporting for Sky News is that on the 14th of February of last year, he's saying that the UAP task force director had briefed someone within the Australian Department of Defence on UAP. Now, how far back does that briefing go? If it was by Jay Stratton, then it would have had to have been prior to January of 2021. If it was between January 2021 and the time of Scott Bray's testimony in May of 2022, then it would have been Brennan McKernan. So if that is true, if Ross's sources are giving him accurate information, and I suspect they are, then we have a UAPF director that has briefed an Australian representative of the Australian Department of Defence well and truly before the AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP. And I would love to get more information and do some digging and see if I can find out more about that. And that's certainly what I'm going to try and do. So let's put a pin in that. We're going to put a pin in who I think in the Australian Department of Defence, or representative of the Australian Department of Defence, may have been briefed by the director of the UAP task force. So let's now move away from the Senate estimates, and let's bring ourselves forward a bit to what everyone has seen time and time again, because I've showed it repeatedly on this show. What was revealed to the world on the 31st of May of last year? Well, let's have Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the then AARO director, refresh our memory.
We have time for one last question.
Sean, you recommended foreign partnership with NASA. I'm curious, especially given your map, Have you, as AARO, partnered with international agencies, and is there ways for reporting to your?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. I want to expound on that just a little bit. So I have just held our first Five Eyes forum on this subject last week, I think it was, or earlier this week. I don't know. Dan was there, and we have, we've entered into discussions with our partners on data sharing. How do they do reporting? What kind of analysis can they help us with? What kind of calibration can they help us with? What can we help them with? And we're establishing all of that right now. And they're going to end up, sending their information and data to us to feed into the process that we've laid out for how we're going to do all of this. Beyond that, I have not had either the time or the bandwidth to do, and that's why I would look to NASA to expand the scientific and academic relationships that they have across all of our allies and partners on how can we bring them into the fold. That's where I think there's a lot of benefit to NASA taking lead on that.
Great. Thank you. But one just clarifications for people who don't know, what are the Five Eyes?
Oh, I'm sorry. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Five Eyes, those are that's the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. So those are the 5 partners.
Terrific. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So there we had revealed to the world that AARO had held its first Five Eyes forum, which we now know was officially called the Five Eyes inaugural UAP Caucus Working Group meeting on the 24th of May, a week prior to that NASA public meeting. And we've subsequently, I was able to find more information about AARO's Five Eyes briefing. So you have now collaboration across the Five Eyes, bringing those allies into discussions on UAP to learn from each other, see if we can find a way to assist each other in better understanding the extent nature of UAP and mitigating the risks that they pose. Now, to make matters worse, well, RAAF continues to be the laughingstock of the Five Eyes, because what did I receive from the Royal Australian Air Force just less than a year prior to that announcement by Sean Kirkpatrick? Following some inquiries that I submitted to the Australian Minister for Defence, Richard Marles, I received a response from the head of Air Force capability, because RAAF has always kind of taken lead again on responding to public inquiries on UAP. And again, you've got the Chief of Air Force, Robert Chipman. If anyone has a need to know on what Australia is doing or not doing on UAP, he's the one. But less than a year prior to that announcement from Kirkpatrick, what does the Royal Australian Air Force say? The Five Eyes is an intelligence alliance comprising of Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, the United States of America. Air Force does not lead on these forums. Air Force does not consider that this the appropriate platform to discuss the topic of UAP or UFO. I hate to break it to you guys in RAAF that, yeah, it is. And the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office has brought in all of its Five Eyes partners into discussions on UAP. So again, it just shows how in the dark and out of touch the Royal Australian Air Force is on the UAP topic. Now, I would personally like to see another agency or organization with the Department of Defense take leadership on the issue of UAP, because clearly RAAF is fumbling all over the place and couldn't organize a piss up in a brewery if they tried. So, and I'm not being harsh on the brave men and women that are at the front lines of RAAF. I'm being harsh on those that are positioned in leadership of the Royal Australian Air Force. Mel Hupfeld, Robert Chipman, and I'm yet to form a position on the new Chief of Air Force, Stephen Chappell. So that is, a bit of egg in the face for the Royal Australian Air Force there. Now, you also have the Royal Australian Air Force very quick after that revelation by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. I fired off a number of inquiries and FOIA requests to see if I could seek confirmation as to who from Australia, did Australia attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP? And if so, which agency or service, defence service, was represented? Well, the Australian Defence Force was very quick to respond to my ministerial inquiry to Minister for Defence Richard Marles, and they came out with a blanket response. This was on the 30th of June 2023, less than a month after Kirkpatrick announced the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. And that letter that I showed you before, where RAAF is saying, oh, Five Eyes is not the appropriate platform for discussions in UAP, that was on the 26th of July of 2022. So they're stating categorically and declarative here, Air Force, being RAAF, did not attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. So someone has obviously asked around within the Royal Australian Air Force, hey, what's this Five Eyes Forum on UAP? Did we have anyone from RAAF attend? No, we didn't. Well, at least good on you for asking around and trying to get us, answer questions that have been thrown your way. So they've come back and said no. No one from Royal Australian Air Force responded. So I and others continued to deep dive, and I was encouraged to see that Senator Whish-Wilson was also asking questions. Did Australia attend the Five Eyes Forum on UAP? And he submitted a question on notice to the Australian Department of Defence in June of 2023, and less than a month later, on the 19th of July, they came back with a response to this question. Did Australia attend the recent Five Eyes meeting held in May 2023? If so, did it attend the US briefings on UAPs? Now, Royal Australian Air Force has come back already to me and said Air Force didn't attend. So do we get an answer in this question on notice? We do. Oh, no, Australia did not attend a United States briefing on UAPs. Huh? A Five Eyes engagement, and Australia is opting out to attend a Five Eyes briefing. How is that possible? Well, as it turns out, and as many of you know, less than 6 months later, Senator Whish-Wilson would continue his line of questioning, not satisfied with that answer, and would ask this question. Well, did the Australian Department of Defence even receive an invitation from the US All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, to attend the inaugural Five Eyes Forum on UAP in May 2023, led by AARO Director Sean Kirkpatrick? If he did, for what reasons did the Australian, for what reasons did the Australian Department of Defence decide that Australia, as a Five Eyes member, not attend AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP? Who has final decision on attendance? And how many Five Eyes forums or meetings has Australia not attended in the past 5 years? So again, myself, Senator Whish-Wilson, working on the assumption that the information that the Australian Department of Defence had provided that Australia did not attend United States briefing on UAPs was factual, where in fact it wasn't factual at all. Oh yes, no, a defence representative at the Australian Embassy in Washington attended. So that 180 backflip, telling us an initial denial that no, we didn't attend, Australia didn't attend, but oh no, then less than 6 months later, oh, sorry, folks, no, yeah, we did attend. So how on earth do you stuff that up and get it so wrong? Well, we're able to confirm with other documentation. I mean, and I've said this before, but it doesn't really instill a whole lot of confidence in me as an Australian taxpayer that my elected representatives and folks like Senator Whish-Wilson, when they ask questions of those people in positions of leadership and authority in the government, Australian Defence Force, if they're asking questions and they cannot even get an accurate or truthful response, I'm sorry, it doesn't instill a lot of confidence in me in the Australian Department of Defence as an Australian taxpayer. Do better, guys, basically. Do a better job, because how can you get that so wrong? And so let's have a look at another document now, which reveals, well, how did they get it so wrong? Well, this is the formal explanation that the Australian Department of Defence provided, which I was able to secure for release through FOIA. And this was some correspondence that was going on internally within Defence. I actually got this by requesting emails for the current Chief of Air Force Stephen Chappell before he was Chief of Air Force. And, issue of the day. A defense representative, so this is the issue. A defense representative for the Australian Embassy in Washington attended a Five Eyes forum on UAP in May 2023. If asked, so if you're asked basically this question at a Senate estimate by a Senator Whish-Wilson, here's how you can respond. If asked, why did defense's response change regarding attendance at the UAP forum when responding to question on notice from Senator Whish-Wilson? The explanation: defense was unable to find a record of attendance at the UAP forum when responding to a question on notice from Senator Peter Whish-Wilson received on 20th of June. Defense later then found a record of attendance when responding to a question on notice from Senator Whish-Wilson received on 2nd November. Well, thanks, guys. You're really not answering the question. That's not an explanation. How did you get it so wrong? Again, what degree of confidence that I have and other Australian senators and members of parliament will have that you're going to provide factually accurate and truthful responses to questions that those that we elect into positions of authority and power are entitled to ask, and you're not even giving them a truthful answer. It doesn't instill much confidence at all. So that was the official explanation that came through. If asked, this is the response. This is the explanation that you provide. Well, then things got worse for the Royal Australian Air Force because I was able to secure for release through US Freedom of Information Act the agenda and the attendance list for AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP, which was officially labeled the Five Eyes Inaugural UAP Caucus Working Group meeting convened on the 24th of May, 2023 at the Pentagon in a skiff. It was a classified briefing. And the intention behind this forum, or this briefing, this inaugural Five Eyes UAP Caucus brings together key partners, just like Jay Stratton's UAP task force slide more than likely indicates that key partners include international allies like Five Eyes. The caucus brings together key partners to cultivate shared awareness of allies, UAP issues, detection, identification, and mitigation activities and challenges, and opportunities for mission-specific collaboration. Planned presentations include our own office updates on operations and analyses, and in bold, updates from Five Eyes partners. The intent is to develop a framework for future UAP collaboration. And who was first cab off the rank to provide a presentation? Us. And yet the Chief of Air Force had not been briefed by the United States on UAP as of February of 2023. Only months later, you would have someone from within Australia get briefed on UAP and provide updates on Australia's efforts. Well, what are those efforts? Because it's clear that the one that's in charge of, discussing and responding to questions on UAP in an Australian context has no idea what's going on and hasn't even been briefed, has only maybe read an executive summary or two, but will happily get briefed on the Chinese spy balloon and those 3 unidentified aerial objects that were shot down by the US Air Force. And so when I tried to get the attendee list for that Five Eyes UAP Caucus Working Group meeting, what did I get back? Nothing but a blank page full of redactions, all redacted. And why was it redacted? Under exemption B6, which is protecting privacy of individuals. So not going to find out who was represented from any of the Five Eyes countries other than those that were already disclosed from the US. Dan Evans, NASA, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, AARO, and Mark McElnary, who was NASA's liaison or director of UAP research and liaison to AARO. So where does that bring us? That brings us to now another document that I was able to secure for release through FOIA. Now, this is some correspondence that was taking place, some emails that I was able to secure from within the Australian Department of Defence, dating back to November of 2023. Clearly, following the question that Senator Whish-Wilson asked in his questions on notice, did Australia attend the United States brief on UAPs, AARO's Five Eyes Forum, folks were asking around. And so we know that Air Force came back very, very quickly, less than a month, less than a month after I submitted an inquiry to the Minister for Defence saying Air Force didn't attend Five Eyes Forum on UAP. And so someone who is the policy officer for Canada, France, United Kingdom in the International Policy Division for the Australian Department of Defence was saying, hey guys, we've got this question on notice from Senator Whish-Wilson. He's asking two questions Air Force may have the answers to, even though they've come back to me, back in June and said Air Force didn't attend. So clearly, word isn't getting around fast enough internally that Air Force has already provided me with commentary that they didn't attend. Did Defence receive an invitation? Sorry, this is pertaining to the invitation now. So did Australia, the question on notice was, did Australia receive an invitation to attend AARO's Five Eyes Forum? Knowing that, so let me backtrack. This email, 14th of November. So the 2nd of November, Senator Whish-Wilson, I'll correct the record, Senator Whish-Wilson submitted a question on notice saying, did Australia receive an invitation to attend AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP? So this was the commentary that was going around. The question on notice is asking these two questions. Did Defence receive an invitation? If yes, what reasons did Australia decide not to attend? The response, that was on the 14th of November. The response, this was from Redacted, the following day on the 15th. Good morning, sir, ma'am. Was there an invitation received? RAAF, i.e. international engagement, are not aware of any invitation being received by Air Force. And months before they said they didn't attend. So they, what degree of asking around did RAAF do back in June when they responded to me? I'm not too sure. Here we have an email same day, later in the afternoon. This is from the Staff Officer Commander, so Defence Space Command. All right, so Defence Space Command did not receive an invitation to AARO's Five Eyes Forum. So people are asking around, which is good. At least they're trying to get to the bottom of, okay, well, we said we didn't attend. It looks like now we did. So, who was it? We said we didn't attend, and we're getting asked the question, did we receive an invitation? So we better see who received the invitation and who rejected it. Again, this is all before they've admitted that Australia then attended the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. So that then takes us to, make sure I'm reading, there we go, attendee list. So let's pull up now the next document. And again, sorry, there's so many documents, folks. I just wanted this. I did say it was going to be a very dense, dense deep dive. So here we have now fast forward to February of this year, where it's obviously come out in December of last year that the Australian Department of Defence has made a backflip admission and said, oh yeah, Australia, we did attend. And so in preparation for the Senate estimates, in February of 2024, this is this year, you've got the Chief of Air Force or someone on behalf of the Chief of Air Force saying, good afternoon, S7. Now that I'm going to talk you through what S7 means in just a moment. Further to my telephone conversation with S7, this afternoon, please find attached the Chief of Air Force Senate estimate brief on UFOs. On return, CAF is Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, is urgently seeking from S7. Notice how S7 is so short. What does that look like to you? That looks like 3 characters. So put a pin in that. Any information, reports, dot points, etc., available as soon as possible, I think that is. I think that's the acronym, I'm not too sure. From the US RO Five Eyes Forum on UAP held in May 2023. That is the subject of 2 questions on notice. I understand that 3 letters, S7, is compiling information for Chief of Air Force to speak to and also as background information. Can you please advise when CAF may expect this information? So February of this year, the Chief of Air Force has no idea what the defense representative that attended AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP in May of the previous year, what was discussed, what transpired, what information Australia shared, what information was shared with us. And so again, another data point that shows just how in the dark and out of touch the Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, is the individual that is leading all discussions on UAP-related matters and fronting up before Senate estimates and answering questions on behalf of the Royal Australian Air Force and the Australian Department of Defence on Australia's position and engagement on UAP. And he doesn't even know what happened at AARO's Five Eyes Forum because he has to ask for it in preparation for the February Senate estimates of this year. And so what is the response that's received to that email? This is on the 12th of February, later that evening. Request for information, 3 letters, response by someone, or not sure. Good afternoon, ma'ams. In keeping with the style as provided in 3 letters, response attached, so there's an attached response, I have prepared a 1-pager on the response timeline for the 2 separate questions and notice received. I can provide further information if required. And all of this information that's obviously pertaining to what transpired and what was those key dot points or summary bullet points on what happened at AARO's Five Eyes Forum is redacted under S7. So pretty much a full page, almost a full page worth, or 3/4 of a page. So what is included in that summary there? We'll never know, and I'll tell you why we'll never know, because I'll talk you through what FOIA exemption S7 is. So let now pull up, make sure there is nothing else I wanted to show you on that one. There we go. So let's pull up our next document. So what is S7? So section 7, in terms of exemption of certain persons and bodies. Section 7, 2A of the FOI Act states an agency is exempt from the operation of this act, the FOIA Act, in relation to the following documents. A document that has originated with or has been received from any of the following. And I have highlighted there the Defense Intelligence Organization, or for short, 3 letters, DIO. Now, I can say with a high degree of confidence that I believe that a representative of the Defense Intelligence Organization was the one that attended AARO's Five Eyes UAP Caucus Group meeting in May 2023. Now, the problem with the Defense Intelligence Organization and all of these on screen is they're all exempt from FOIA. So you can't get any information, any records from any of those organizations, which is incredibly, incredibly frustrating. And this is kind of more supporting evidence to who I believe was represented at AARO's Five Eyes UAP Caucus Working Group meeting. This was a FOIA request that I submitted on the 22nd of December 2023, in the days following the Australian Department of Defence reversal and saying, yes, a defence representative at the embassy in Washington, D.C. attended. So I requested copies of written correspondence and emails sent from to or cross-copied. So sent from or to the defense representative at the Australian Embassy in Washington that attended the Five Eyes Forum briefing meeting on UAP, led by the US All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office in May 2020. Now, that should be 2023. I think that was a typo on their part. That includes, some of these search words. They identified one document as matching the scope of the request, but the release of that document was refused due to Section 7 of the FOIA Act. And again, Section 7 is just what I showed you. So again, more data points to suggest that it was a representative from the Defense Intelligence Organization that attended AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP. And it's in February of 2024 that the Chief of Air Force is only then asking for information about what happened at AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP. He's clearly not up to scratch and is scrambling ahead of the Senate estimates in February to get information in case he's asked by Senator Whish-Wilson or another senator in a hearing. Now, one of the reasons why Senator Whish-Wilson hasn't attended any Senate estimates hearings since February 2023 is he's a participating member of the Senate estimates for the portfolio of defense, foreign affairs, and trade. So he basically has to wait around the whole day to see if and when he can be allocated some time, usually less than 10 minutes, by the Greens contingent, if he can get some time to ask questions of, say, the Chief of Air Force. Now, it's not a good use, as it's been explained to me, it's not really a good use of his time to be waiting around all day when there are other things and other priorities that he can be addressing or working on that are important to his constituents. UAP is one small part of it. He's obviously got some very other big issues that are important to his constituents. So that said, Senator Whish-Wilson can still and has submitted written questions on notice that can actually be, as beneficial and even more of greater benefit than if he was actually at the Senate estimates in person asking questions, because he can craft questions, he can submit a number of questions, and a question on notice has to be responded to by the Australian Department of Defence. So let's pull up now, let's come to all new documents that my good friend Roger Stankovic, who is, if you don't follow him on X, I would certainly consider you doing so. He's the director for MUFON for Australia and New Zealand. He's also a scientist, and he submitted a FOIA request, and I'm going to read you through this because this shows you the benefit of appealing a refusal response that you get if you ever submit a FOIA request. So on September of 2023, this is, I know the dates have gone back and forth, but on September 2023, again, this is after the Australian Department of Defence have said a few months earlier that Australia didn't attend AARO's Five Eyes Forum. On this date, Roger submitted a FOIA request asking for documents from the department that include the keywords UAP, UAS, other acronyms that might be associated with UFO for a date range of January 23 to September of 2023. Now, he had to revise the scope of his request, and he included FVEY and Five Eyes in his as his search words. On October 2023, he received a decision that refused the request, saying basically that documents could not be found, they don't exist, or they haven't been received. Now, I gave Roger some suggestions on how he can submit an appeal, because after correspondence with him, I felt that a no document response was not sufficient, because I knew there were documents that had those keywords in them across that date range. So on May the 22nd of this year, the office, the OAIC, which is the can't remember the bloody acronym off the top of my head. It's the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner, advised Defence that the applicant, Roger, was seeking a review of Defence's decision. So Roger appealed this refusal. Upon review of Roger's contentions, fresh searches were requested from the relevant business areas. As a result of these searches, 12 documents were identified, 12 documents that Roger wouldn't receive if he just accepted the refusal response that he got. These 12 documents are subject to this internal review. And Roger's contentions were basically that new information was recorded, that there was all that Australia then kind of did a 180 and said, oh, yes, we did attend AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP, so there must be some official documentation pertaining to that. Documentation of this meeting should be available to the DID and searchable through FOI. I was informed that it was not, and Roger kind of goes on. So the revised decision was, after conducting fresh searches and locating additional documents, I, the reviewer, have decided to vary the original decision by granting partial access to the documents and reasons for any redactions in what was released. So kudos to Roger for submitting appeal, because it was successful and he was able to secure for release, which he shared with me, and he's permitted me to share with you now, some documents that I think are very, very interesting. So this is, we'll start from, this was an email on the 20th of June of 2023 from the FOI case management to the strategy, policy, and I can't remember what the I stands for, Minister on Parliamentary. This is a formal, so this is what Roger was able to get based on his search that got, his appeal got granted. This is a formal tasking relating to a request made on the 9th of June under the FOI Act. This is actually a FOIA request that I submitted. So I requested, what was I asking for? I was asking for copies of meeting agendas, attendees list, meeting documents, briefing documents, talking points, all related to AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP. Now, I got a no documents response on that, but this is what was in the email chain that Roger was able to secure for release. So that was the question. This is a formal tasking. The question was, please be advised that RAAF have been notified of this request. However, they've noted they're not the appropriate business area to respond to this request. So RAAF is saying, we don't have anything on record about AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP. So we're really not the appropriate business unit to be responding or addressing, helping you with your FOI queries or searches. RAAF was originally tasked with the request, however, was identified as not the appropriate business area, holds no documents relevant to the scope of my FOIA request. Let's come up to what I think is the important one, though. Now, you can see this was an email. When was this? This was on the 27th of June. There's some conversations being had internally in relation to these FOIA requests. After searching the high side and low side on Objective, which is their internal document management solution they use, for Five Eyes Foreign Material Program. Now, that was what Larry Maguire had disclosed in his letter to the Defense Minister in Canada. We won't talk about the Five Eyes Foreign Material Program today. There were no documents pertaining to that. But this is the key one. In addition, FOI 801 also were no documents, emails, or written correspondence pertaining to the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. I can't find anything in our document management system relating to this forum between May and June on the high side or low side, after specifically searching all these terms. So it's good to know, again, that there are some searches being conducted internally within Defence, trying to respond to these FOIA requests that have been submitted after Defence has come out and said, no, we didn't attend, yes, we did attend, and so on. But this is the important one. This is the one I wanted to show you. Now, I would love to know who it is that submitted an inquiry that was then considered ministerial correspondence and responded to on behalf of the Minister of Defence. I don't have record of this, but the subject matter was Australia's Five Eyes involvement in UAP crash retrieval. So someone in the general public had submitted an inquiry potentially to the Minister for Defence, or it could have been, with the Minister for Defence, asking about Australia's involvement in UAP crash retrievals. Hi, team. This has been assigned for departmental response, and we're asking the Air Force to be able to provide some responses to the questions that have been submitted in the inquiry from this individual. Now, we don't know what was in the that member of the general public's inquiries. If they're watching this episode, I would love them to reach out to me and share what they had requested. So the response from presumably Air Force to Parliamentary Coordinator MC. Thanks again. Hey, redacted to protect their privacy. Thanks again. As discussed, while we understand that redacted has asked these questions, that's probably Senator Whish-Wilson, has asked these questions, I think it is anyway, in questions in relation to a UAP. Someone is seeking more specific answers. Oh no, that's probably not Whish-Wilson, it's probably someone internally, is seeking more specific answers to questions in relation to Five Eyes programs. We are more than happy to contribute to the response and provide more general information regarding UAP. However, the correspondence should either be referred back to DIG for reconsideration, noting the above, or alternately SP&I, Strategy, Policy, and International, I think it is, might be. Let's do a quick search. Just so I can get it right. It's Strategy, Policy, and Industry. I was off on the I. So Strategy, Policy, and Industry. The queries relating to Five Eyes is beyond the scope of Air Force's responsibility. So that's probably why Air Force didn't think that the Five Eyes was the appropriate platform for UAP to be discussed, because they're really not got anything to do with Five Eyes, according to them. So that tells us that they're certainly, and why then is the Air Force the one that is leading on UAP-related matters before Senate estimates, if they're not the ones that are, is beyond the, if Five Eyes engagements are beyond the scope of the Air Force, it seems a bit odd. So the response that came back from that, presumably, this is what's important. From now, I don't know if these are all in order. This was to the parliamentary coordinator. So I'm suspecting this is from someone in that group to the Defense Intelligence Group. Hi, DIG. So this is being addressed to someone in the Defense Intelligence Group, and we'll talk about them in just a moment. Can you please reconsider this departmental response in line with the updated tasking tool? DIG responsible for intelligence international engagement, including the Five Eyes Intelligence Partnership. So DIG, whatever DIG, Defense Intelligence Group, whatever that is responsible. They're the ones that would be engaged in discussions on Five Eyes intelligence partnerships and activities, specifically AARO's Five Eyes UAP Caucus Working Group meeting. Please consult with Air Force regarding the UAPs. In line with the MECC service offer, if you believe that this item does not sit with your group service, it is your responsibility to liaise with the appropriate area to determine ownership or negotiate input from another group or service. MECC requires email notification of agreed changes. All right, fine. Next one. Now, this is presumably from I don't know if it's from DIG, but it's saying, hi, Air Force, we haven't been able to get anyone in defense to address this from the Five Eyes perspective. On consideration, I suggest that it's not appropriate in any case to be discussing Five Eyes and ministerial interaction for security reasons. So they do not want to touch anything on Five Eyes and make it public. Can Air Force please provide some very generic words on UAP to someone? So while the AARO is being very open about its engagement across the Five Eyes on UAP, it's clearly obvious that Australia does not want to talk about any Five Eyes activities whatsoever. And if we come up further in this document, I think I just wanted to show you. That again, people were asking around for information pertaining to AARO's Five Eyes Forum. You can see here's an example. Good afternoon, team. When's this? Is June. Thank you so much for your time on the phone just now. It's discussed. Appreciate your assistance in answering question, did Australia attend the Five Eyes? So again, this just shows us that there were questions being asked around, but the person that knew the information and had the need to know, that wasn't being shared appropriately within Department of Defense to respond to Senator Whish-Wilson's question on the notice and to respond to FOIA requests and ministerial correspondence. I've spoken with our divisions. They're unable to provide input. They're not aware of this meeting and briefing, and that's at the SP and I industry group level. So who does know about the meeting? Well, I'll tell you, and I've said this time and time again, who is the DIG? Who is the Defense Intelligence Group? The Defense Intelligence Group, if I show you, actually, before I do that, I'll make sure I got the right document here. This is the one that I wanted to show you. So this is the most recent Senate Estimates Brief, previously known as the Chief of Air Force Brief on UAP, and we can see the handling note. Air Marshal Robert Chipman is to lead on the topic, along with Professor Tanya Monroe, who's the Chief Defense Scientist, to lead on Defense Science and Technology Group activities related to UAP, talking about sensor equipment, imaging, and so on. So again, these are the two people that have a need to know on everything that's happening UAP-related matters in an Australian context. That would include Five Eyes engagement, Australia's involvement in the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. And clearly, they didn't know about it, because you saw in that email before that there was a request that the Chief of Air Force be provided some summary information, executive summary information on what transpired at AARO's meeting. So if I come to what's interesting about this document, actually, you know what? Before I come back to this document, let me answer what I was going to say before. Well, who is the Defense Intelligence Group? So this is on the Australian Department of Defense website, Defense Intelligence Group. The Defense Intelligence Group, DIG, brings together Defence's intelligence functions to deliver priority-driven fused intelligence analysts and products. DIG delivers intelligence capability to support ADF operations and sets intelligence policies and frameworks to meet the essential intelligence needs of government and senior defense decision makers. Really, though? I'll tell you. And who are the divisions? The DIG operates according to intelligence controls, including complying with the obligations of the Intelligence Service Act. The intelligence mandate and specific privacy rules is defined by the Ministers of Defence. Divisions. Australian Geospatial Intelligence Organisation, comparable with the National Geospatial Agency in the US. But who do we see here? The Defence Intelligence Organisation analyzes information on global events from a range of sources. DIG produces timely and accurate intelligence assessments to assist the awareness and decision-making of the Minister of Defence and senior defence officers. Well, why is it that the Chief of Air Force is asking for information on AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP in February of this year, when AARO's briefing took place in May of 2023? They're not really, doing a whole lot to assist the awareness and decision-making there, when it's the Chief of Air Force that's the one that has to front up at Senate estimates and ask questions. And you might be wondering, why is it that in this comprehensive Senate estimates brief that gets kind of updated in preparation for future Senate estimates, so that if the Chief of Air Force or if the Chief Defense Scientist is asked questions before Senate estimates by a senator, they're prepped. Whoops, they've got some information, they're ready to go. Now, what's interesting in this document, never once in this document, and I've secured for release all of the various iterations of this document dating back to May of 2022, why is it that in the background information of this document, which kind of gives a historical timeline of everything that's happened in the US on UAP, most recently March of this year, but if we go back obviously talks about, 2021 preliminary assessment on UAP done by ODNI, update 15th of July 2022. The annual report that was delivered on the 11th of January 2023. 19th of April, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick testifies before Kirsten Gillibrand's Senate Armed Services Committee Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities hearings. And then we fast forward to August 31st. Where's the Five Eyes UAP caucus working group meeting? Why is that not disclosed in this briefing document that the Chief of Air Force and the Chief Defense Scientist would review to prepare them for questions that they might be asked at Senate estimates? Where's that Five Eyes engagement? You've just seen that they don't want anything pertaining to Five Eyes to be in the public domain. So they have completely kept this off this document. And they've also withheld it from, presumably, anyone that needs to read this brief in preparing for Senate estimates, like the Chief of Air Force. Why? Why is the US being so transparent on what was discussed at the Five Eyes UAP caucus working group meeting by AARO, but defense is not even prepared to admit or disclose that there was a Five Eyes engagement, that Australia, it's just completely omitted. Why is it left off? That's probably the most important piece of background information, and it's not even in this document. Why? Is it because all of the information is housed within the holdings of the Defense Intelligence Organization that is exempt from FOIA? Well, in that case, include it in this document and then just redact it if it's secured for release through FOIA. But it's not even included as a redaction in this document. So it's not even being included for the eyes of the Chief of Air Force. And that's, again, how in the dark and out of touch is the Chief of Air Force when there's no information given in this document about AARO's Five Eyes engagement. So again, incredibly puzzling as to why that's the case. And I would say that, remember I said to put a pin in it before, that it's likely probable that the Australian Defence Force or a representative of the Australian Defence Force had been briefed by the UAPTF, whether it was Brendan McKernan or Jay Stratton. I would not be surprised if it was, again, I say this with a high degree of confidence, that the Defence Intelligence Organisation, a representative, attended AARO's Five Eyes UAP caucus working group meeting in May of last year. I would not be surprised if it was also a representative from the Defence Intelligence Organisation that was briefed by the director of the UAPTF, either Brendan McKernan or Jay Stratton, in the years prior to AARO's Five Eyes engagement. And the Chief of Air Force has no idea about that whatsoever, because he's admitted that when he testified at the Senate estimates. So I give a very poor report card rating for the Chief of Air Force. I don't think he has done a very good job, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, whatsoever, being apprised of what's happening on the UAP topic, that and how it can potentially, the implications for Australia. I think he's done a very poor job, and I hope that the new man that assumed command of the Royal Australian Air Force in July of this year, Stephen Chappell, is going to be somewhat more proactive in his attempts to stay on top of Australia's engagement, ask and demand questions, so that he, being in a position, he has a need to know in order to answer questions before a Senate estimates. So I don't know a whole lot about Stephen Chappell, other than the fact that he assumed command of the Royal Australian Air Force in July of this year. And there is an article on the Australian Defence Force's website that basically documents that change of command that took place. I won't read this article, but there was a ceremony in Canberra. I think there was, Stephen Chappell was quoted, "My role as your Chief of Air Force is to serve you, our aviators, and our nation in this noble endeavor. I'm honored to be your 28th Chief of Air Force, and I look forward to repaying the trust you placed in me." Well, if your role is to serve aviators and the nation, well, maybe you should start by serving your aviators by at least being formally briefed on the safety of flight risk that UAP pose, and maybe consider doing a survey of aviators that are coming forward and speaking to investigative journalists like Ross Coulthart and saying they see something in Australian airspace that is anomalous. They're not reporting it out of fear of stigma and ridicule, and the fact that the RAAF's current position on UAP is there's nothing to it. It's just foreign adversarial technology or human technology, sensor errors, or it's just natural benign phenomena. It's not. It couldn't be anything else. We've got it under control, folks. Move along. Whereas the US is taking a very different approach to that altogether. Now, again, like I said, I don't know a whole lot about the new Chief of Air Force. I'll be interested to follow him quite closely in future Senate estimates, or I've already requested emails through FOIA for Stephen Chappell. He's been with the Royal Air Force since January of 1993, graduated from the Australian Affairs Force Academy in 95. He's clearly done quite a lot of stuff in his tenure with the Royal Australian Air Force. In 2013, he attended the Australian Command and Staff College, completing a Master of Military and Strategic Studies, and was awarded the Chief of Air Force Prize. So I will reserve my judgment on Stephen Chappell. I just hope that he does a better job than his predecessor, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, on taking this topic seriously and treating it with the respect and scrutiny that it deserves, and that the brave men and women at the front lines of the Royal Australian Air Force deserve as well. So begs the question, will he take the UAP topic seriously? So let's use that as an opportunity to close off our poll. And so our poll has ended, and the results are as follows. If I can see my screen here. So we had, I can't get the bottom of my screen. So frustrating. So we had, will the new Chief of Air Force take the UAP issue seriously? The most voted response was, dude, it's RAAF, at 40%, followed by 2 words, plausible deniability, 33%. And the remaining results I can't see because my screen is being shadowed by the bottom of my taskbar. So if someone wants to type a quick question or comment into the chat, I might be able to see what the other results are, but I'll come to that in just a moment anyway. So I know that was incredibly dense, folks. Again, I wanted this to serve as really a comprehensive piece for maybe those that aren't as well versed in the Royal Australian Air Force's involvement in the UAP conversation since 2021. So it brings them up to speed from then to now. And I know a lot of you that watch this show regularly will probably be well aware of what I've showed today, other than that new document that came from Roger Stankovic's appeal. The last 2 results that were voted was at 25%. Thank you. I needed a good laugh. Oh, and 0%. I'm feeling good about this guy. So no one has any confidence in the new Chief of Air Force. Oh, that's voted. So that's disappointing, but maybe that's a sign. Is that going to be a prophecy? I don't know. So anyway, so let's move away from that lead story, folks, because I do want to get into some other things before we wrap up. I know that I've gone this is going to be a long session. So if you do need to run, please feel free. and come back and watch on demand. I am very appreciative of the comments that have come through thus far. So I wanted to give kudos to Jimmy for your comments. I just want to give Tanya Monroe some truth serum to spew out what she knows about the topic. Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what her level of engagement and what she's been briefed on to date. I've been reaching out to her on all known contact points so far. It's been crickets. Bugger. Well, kudos to you for your efforts, Jimmy. And yeah, I back you there, Jasmine, on Jimmy's efforts. Love your tenacity. And good on for you for doing your part, my friend. Some other comments that have come through. Something is going on. The top RAAF staff knows it. Plausible deniability. It's certainly an option. Jasmine, imagine how entertaining this presser would be if it was Trump speaking, like when he announced about al-Baghdadi. Yeah, it's. I would love to see the new Chief of Air Force, Stephen Chappell, get asked questions about UAP in an Australian context. I'm sure you not getting a Christmas card from the Australian DoD, Grant. I think I'm on their shit list. Of certainly RAAFs, that's for sure. But and maybe the Freedom of Information team. But they've been great, actually. I've had very courteous and professional back and forth with the FOI team, so they've done a good job. I just don't necessarily agree with the position of those in leadership within Defence and the Royal Australian Air Force. We do indeed love Roger. He does a great job, and he is indeed a gentleman. Shane, thank you for your comments. Can't comment too much driving. Be safe. Make sure you're only listening to the podcast version and not watching as you drive. So do indeed drive safely there, Shane. I wish there was an emoji for an air horn. Data derivations. Will the new Chief of Air Force take the UAP issues seriously? Thank you for putting that in. For folks that can't see the results, Dudit's RAAF comes in at 40%. 2 words, plausible deniability, 33%. Thank you. I need a good laugh, 25%. And I'm feeling good about this guy. Gets a donut. Nothing. So that's a bit of a shame, isn't it? Thank you, Jasmine. After your presentation, Grant, we all know why. So let's now segue, folks, and just go through a few other things that's been happening. Let's jump into the rundown. So let's segue and have a talk about some of the things that have been happening close to home and abroad that may be of interest. Now, again, I know we're probably going to go over, we're going to crack the 3-hour mark again. I'll try and keep this under the 3.5-hour mark. So let's start with Global Disclosure Day was on the 20th of October, only a few days ago, done by the New Paradigm Institute. It was at a crazy hour, so I tried to stay up and watch as much as I could before falling asleep with my phone on my face. But I did watch the recording. But what I did find interesting is that Carl Nell presented, and he said a few things that piqued my interest from an Australian perspective. So have a listen.
Evidence. The Twining memo from 1947. General Nathan Twining, future Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force, wrote a memorandum that said the UFOs are most likely extraterrestrial. There's official Australian documents declassified on the National Archives of Australia from 1971 from their defense attaché that made a formal assessment of the United States' interest in UFOs, the reality of that, and the fact that the U.S. was investigating anti-gravity programs in concert with looking into UFOs, a conclusion that would make no sense unless the reality of this topic was demonstrated. So some people say, well, if this is real, why don't they fly over the White House or something? Well, in 1952, UFOs flew over Washington, D.C. over 2 weekends. There were radar visual sightings, there were air-to-air intercepts, and it created the largest press conference since World War II up to that time. People say, well, why don't they just land during the middle of the day? Well, that happened in 1994 at the Ariel School in Rua, Zimbabwe, where UFOs presented themselves with beings and occupants on the ground, witnessed by numerous children. The exact same incident happened in 1966 in West Hall, Australia. The people that witnessed those events are still alive, and they continue to state the assertion of that being a factual occurrence.
So, just interesting, he's referenced Harry Turner's 1971 Joint Intelligence Organization Minute Paper, which has been making the rounds a lot recently, thanks to the good work that Jesse Michaels has been doing. He's interviewed David Grusch. He's done a great deep dive of T. Townsend Brown. He's interviewed Lou Elizondo most recently. And what basically, for those of you that don't know the document that I'm referring to, it's available via the National Archives of Australia, and it's a very interesting document that basically, Harry Turner in 1971, who was an Australian nuclear scientist who took a keen interest in the UFO topic, and he wanted to do a scientific and intelligence assessment of the UFO problem. And so, he basically, I'll just read these first two paragraphs. I'm not going to read the entire document. The two documents attached are intended to focus on aspects of the UFO problem that have tended to remain hidden. The report dealing with the US attitude has been compiled from official reports and statements made by the CIA, US Air Force, congressional hearings, and Project Blue Book records. The second document deals with evidence for weapon systems used by UFOs. This evidence has been culled from computerized records collected by Dr. Jacques Vallée, in collaboration with Dr. Hynek at Northwestern University, and represents only a fraction of worldwide reports dealing with the same weapon systems. Australia has had its share of this kind of reporting. Intelligence aspects include assessments of real from false reporting, capabilities of propulsion methods, and possible weapons used, motivation, operation, harmful or not, defensive, offensive, scientific, etc., for both short-term and long-term, and whether there are more effective ways to defect these operations or defend them if necessary. O.H. Turner, Harry Turner, 27th of May, 1971. Now, what's really also, so it's really kind of an appraisal. It's a comprehensive timeline of everything that the US was doing from basically 1947 through to, I guess, 1971, to investigate the UAP topic, from the Project Sign, Grudge Days, through to Blue Book, through to all the other programs, and also included some very interesting information about anti-gravity research that was being conducted in the scientific community in the 1950s. And this document, again, you can find it in the National Archives, a very, very interesting document. And it's been referenced, as I said, time and time again by Jesse Michaels on a number of the podcasts that he've done. And most recently, he talked about it with Lou Elizondo in the episode, the interview that he did. And I'll play that exchange for you now.
That Dave Grusch said that Oppenheimer was part of setting up the original UFO secrecy protocols with the Atomic Energy Commission. Can you confirm or deny that?
It wouldn't surprise me. That was before my time. I don't know. I didn't know Oppenheimer. I met Teller once.
You met Teller?
Yeah, when I was a kid. I was about 7 years old on a Air Florida flight. My father had some friends in the government, and he put me on a plane with him, and we went from Sarasota to Miami on a Air Florida flight, and there was he was eating, very old at the time. I remember sitting next to him, and he was eating chicken soup.
No way.
Yeah, and I had no idea at the time his significance. Only later, my father was like,
He had to have, to me, been involved in this stuff if this stuff existed. He was the smartest guy. He, there's this 1971 Australian document, actually, that Grusch cites a lot. That is this guy, I think it's the head of their nuclear division, this guy, Harry Turner. He's writing for the Joint Intelligence Organization, which is their CIA. And I think because there's some atomic testing going on in Australia, they start to see stuff. And they're like, oh, maybe these UFOs are more real than meets the eye. And the US kind of official version of this stuff around Blue Book was actually not super real. And they start to investigate. And it's this whole thing about the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence. They list the scientists involved in anti-gravity research, and Teller and Oppenheimer are both named. So,
would not be at all surprising.
Pretty crazy stuff.
Small community.
A small community.
So there you go. So really interesting obviously Jesse Michaels has done such a deep dive of that document, and I'm hoping to do a bit of a deep dive on it myself in a future episode. And if I can, haven't reached out to him yet, but I'm keen to do it. If there's one individual that will probably know a lot of information about this Joint Intelligence Organization minute paper that was authored by Harry Turner in 1971, none other than veteran Australian researcher Bill Chalker, because Bill Chalker, who I have a ton of respect for and I'll be able to learn from directly over the years, he interviewed Harry Turner a number of times before he passed. And so if there's anyone that knows probably more about the genesis of that Joint Intelligence Organization document, what the motivations were, the source material, what Harry's thoughts were on it, what was maybe left out of the report, I think Bill would be able to provide some great context around that document and probably dispel any myths or rumors or falsehoods that are out there in the public domain on that document. So again, check it out if you're keen to look at it. It's in the National Archives of Australia, just a fascinating document. And Bill Chalker actually has done a great talk, a presentation, I think it was on for the UFO Research Society for New South Wales, might have been a year back or something. He talked about not just this document briefly, but Harry Turner and his engagement with Harry Turner on multiple occasions before he passed away. So, Bill, if you do watch, I do plan to reach out to you to see if you're keen to have a bit of a chat about it. Now, to Jimmy's point, yes, Carl Nell unfortunately got some information incorrect there about Westall. There were never any reports of beings on the ground at Westall. There was only one individual that has come forward only recently who claims to have been a witness at Westall and reported beings, but the vast majority of the primary witnesses of Westall, which is several hundred children and even some teachers, they only observed what many described as resembling flying saucers in the sky above their school. Between 1 and 3, it's ambiguous how many there were, and descending, one or more descending over a densely wooded area known as the Grange, about less than a kilometre south of the school in Westall. And as many of you will no doubt know, I did a documentary on a number of the Westall witnesses going back, when was it? Back in, it was probably over April, so May, June 2023. So a bit over a year ago, she goes shy of 90 minutes. If you're interested to watch it, feel free, just jump on my channel, look for it. You'll see it's the first video that you can choose from in my on my YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen it, feel free to give it a watch. Some good long form interviews with some of the primary witnesses. So some information that wasn't quite right there from Carl Nell, but certainly was a very interesting event that happened in Australia on the 6th of April, 1966. Jimmy's comments, cough, not capturing orb date. That is yes. So don't get me started on the orbs that Lou Elizondo claims to have observed on a number of occasions, a number of years. And Jimmy, is Jasmine's comments. So just interesting that Global Disclosure Day, Carl Nell's comments I found to be pretty interesting. Let's now move this show along as we come now to just a few other things I just want to share with you. Just a shout out to my good pal, Jeff Cruikshank, who has now done 2 op-ed pieces, some articles for the Liberation Times. He most recently put out a really interesting article on UFO, the association with JFK and UFOs. He's done a ton of research in this area, and I've put a link in the description in the show notes below. So if you want to have a look at it, it is a very interesting read. You will need to take a bit of time to sift your way through it, because there is a lot in the article. I obviously won't read through it now in the interest of time, but if you're keen to have a look at it, do check it out in the link in the show notes below. And again, Jeff has Jeff does some great research. I had the good fortune of having him on the podcast in August of last year with Bill Chalker and Ross Coulthart. So if you haven't seen that episode, feel free and have a look at it. It's interesting viewing, and this is an interesting read from Jeff. So what else has been happening locally and abroad? Thanks to Jimmy, this is a big kudos to Jimmy here for flagging this with me. So only recently, in the last couple of days, the Frederick Valentich case was discussed on ABC Radio. And ABC Radio had a gentleman by the name, researcher by the name of George Simpson, who's actually done a ton of research on the Valentich mystery and authored a book called Nothing on Radar. And so I've put the link to the program, the ABC Radio program, in the description. So if you want to listen to it, it goes for around about 16 minutes. I'm not going to play the whole thing for you because I obviously don't want to get hit with a copyright strike, but I will play for you one short segment from the episode. So the link is in the show notes, like I said. I'm just going to play for you towards the back end of the ABC. Episode. Let's bring it forward to we don't want to play it from. There we go. So I'll play it from here because what George talks about in the episode, above and beyond, obviously, Frederick Valentich's encounter, he talks about the genesis of the image that appears on the book that he authored. So let me play this for you. Hopefully it will, if someone wants to give me just a thumbs up in the chat that the audio is coming through. So I had some problems before. So maybe Jimmy, give me a thumbs up if you can hear this on your end.
There was a guy taking photos on the beach that evening, taking a series of sunset photos about every 30 seconds. He had a motor drive, an Olympus camera, and he had it set on infinity, and he wasn't looking at it. He was just looking at his watch, timing 30-second intervals. So he wasn't seeing what was happening in front of him. And he captured this image in one of the photos, and that's on the cover of my book. I got permission from him. Now, you might think it sounds funny. He was a plumber, and his surname is Manifold. But anyway, because the manifold is, is a system of pipes. So anyway, he's taken this photo, and it's on the cover of the book. And he gave me, I got written permission to use it because that photo is a very strange thing, and it's just in the same area. He was at, Roy was at Crayfish Bay, and Fred flew right over Crayfish Bay about 15 or 20 minutes after this photo was taken.
All right, the mystery continues. George,
so there you go. So very interesting that that image that is on the cover of George Simpson's book is what was snapped from a photograph that was taken by someone that observed something strange around the same time as Valentich encountered what it was that he encountered. So interesting connection, quite possibly. And I haven't had a chance to read the book yet. I've got a ton of different books and audio books that I'm working my way through, but it was good to hear from George on that ABC Radio program. So again, thanks to you, Jimmy, for pointing that one out for me. Again, if you want to listen to the whole 16-minute interview, you can. It's in the show notes if you want to have a look at it. So now this one is an important one, and I think this will be of significant interest for those of you that are quite keen on getting updates from me and others on FOIA. So we had Nick, who I follow and follows me on X. He's been doing some great work in New Zealand using New Zealand's Freedom of Information Act, the official Information Act over there. And so he was going after documentation within the holdings of the New Zealand Defence Force and Ministry of Defence pertaining to AARO's Five Eyes UAP caucus working group meeting from from May 2023. And I've added the link in the description below, so if you want to have a look at this, you can. But Nick states, we have received the latest chapter in the ongoing saga that is UAP-driven OIA requests. Smiley face, my meta request. It looks like a lieutenant colonel attended the Five Eyes UAP meeting with AARO. I think that's all I'm going to get out of the New Zealand Defence Force now. So what is it that Nick is referring to there? Well, that is a good segue into this all-new document that has been secured for release through the New Zealand Official Information Act FOIA, comparable FOIA in New Zealand, from Nick Hudson. So there are a number of different colors that I've used for highlights in this document, and I'm going to talk you through why I've separated them out. But this was an email that was submitted by Nick on the 20th of June of this year, asking for documents, information related to the May 2023 UAP briefing and New Zealand Defence Force involvement. I won't read through the entire email. I'm writing submit a request for specific documents and information relating to the participation of New Zealand Defence Force representatives at the May 2023 UAP briefing held in Washington, D.C., and the subsequent discussions and topics covered in that meeting. The request details, so Nick asked specifically for information pertaining to participation confirmation, who attended on behalf of the New Zealand Defence Force, Dr. Kirkpatrick's welcoming address and US updates and UAP efforts, so asking for documents pertaining to that may be in the possession of New Zealand Defence Force, asking for updates from Five Eyes partners, specifically New Zealand's, specific document information on updates provided by New Zealand representatives regarding UAP activities, investigations, or initiatives. The Five Eyes UAP collaboration way ahead plan, any documents that are available on that. UAP database, any documents or records regarding the establishment, maintenance, or use of databases held by the New Zealand Defence Force or in collaboration with Five Eyes partners related to UAP sightings, reports, or investigations. So that was Nick's request. And so there is a long email chain that goes back and forth. This was, so Nick's email was on the 20th. This was an email internally. Good afternoon, someone. We have received the latest chapter in the ongoing saga that is UAP-driven OIA requests. So they're clearly sick of receiving these sorts of requests on UAP. I can tell you guys, OIA, it's not going to stop if Nick and others have anything to do about it. Does SE hold any of the below identified information, the info that Nick was asking for? And if so, is it accessible? I did note also that this request is pitched more at possible Five Eyes collaboration as opposed to the US collaboration that Nick's previous request was pitched around. And so then we go through response. Certainly no change to what I provided a few months back. Who this individual is, we don't know. I will reach out to the US again and see if they have anything further to add. Good morning. This response, so the responses in blue, obviously yellow was Nick. The responses in blue are from the New Zealand Defence Force, and there'll be another color which I'll allude to in just a moment. It would be good to have confirmation ahead of time, particularly around the following. So these are the questions that New Zealand Defence Force are asking to try and get details so they can respond to Nick's request. Was Lieutenant Colonel someone a representative on the New Zealand Defence Attaché's office when attending this meeting? Bullet point 2, no documents received from Australia, UK, and Canada on the UAP briefing and related matters. So is that correct? There's no documents. And are there no information generated by New Zealand Defence Force on the 5A's UAP collaboration way ahead plan? So that was clarification that was being requested. Hi, sorry I dropped track on this after the US reply to, I'm guessing they haven't answered the below then. If not, I'll send out to clarify. Nothing has changed. Read New Zealand getting points 2 and 3 to the best of our knowledge. So they're not getting any documents pertaining to bullet points 2 and 3. This is where it gets interesting though. Let me pull this up. All right. Hi, Thingamabob. I have engaged Lieutenant Colonel someone who has provided some responses in the attached document. I also provide the following summary. Now, I've highlighted those that are of interest to us. The DA Brig Chaplin, so the DA I think is Defense Attaché, Brigadier Chaplin did not receive the invitation and did not attend the briefing. The briefing was attended by Lieutenant Colonel someone. So we now know for the first time, and thanks to Nick's post, that a Lieutenant Colonel within the New Zealand Defence Force, representative of the New Zealand Defence Force, attended AARO's Five Eyes UAP Caucus Working Group meeting. In discussion with the AARO office, there is more information. The US office that is responsible for UAP is the AARO. They have a public-facing website, has a large amount of information the requester Nick could access to meet their requirements. In discussion with the AARO office, there is more information on this site than what was discussed at the unclassified level last year. Now that I'm confused by that statement, because the meeting was a classified meeting for starters. It was held in TSSCI room. I believe it was held in a SCIF. I don't think it was an unclassified meeting to the best of my knowledge. And they're saying there's more information on AARO's site than what was public available at an unclassified level. So maybe I'm not too sure what that means. Discussed at an unclassified level last year. Was it an unclassified meeting or was it classified? If it was unclassified, then why have we not been able to get any information from? Why is it all exempt and from FOIA for Australia? Why is it all exempt from the US? Yeah, and New Zealand not getting any information from AARO. We have no authority to release any documents from other nations. The requester is best to seek that information directly from the nations mentioned. We have classified emails that discuss attendance at the event, the proposed agenda, and action items arising from the meeting. Now, that's what I've been able to secure for release through the US FOIA. The attendance record, which was all completely redacted, the proposed agenda, but we don't have any of the action items. So that would be something that would be worth pursuing through FOIA. In terms of the OIA request itself, the FOIA request, Lieutenant Colonel has consulted AARO on the information being requested, and they have provided comment in green on the attached Word document, and he has provided his comments in blue. So Lieutenant Colonel has actually provided some commentary on what you're about to see, and AARO has provided some information directly to the New Zealand Defence Force. What is that? So specifically, this is what AARO has responded, and wouldn't you know it, it's all redacted, but at least we can see to what depth they've provided responses. So with respect to what Nick was requesting on participation, who was involved, who attended, well, you've got all this information that's redacted, and I suspect that's the response from AARO. The comment, though, the comment from the Lieutenant Colonel that attended was the DA, the Defence Attaché, did not receive the invitations. The invitation arrived on classified means. Something received the invitation directly, Lieutenant Colonel, due to his responsibilities as to the Undersecretary of Defence. Now, I'm presuming that was a blue comment, so I'm presuming that's from the Lieutenant Colonel. Again, it would be good to get some greater clarity on what these redactions are, but unfortunately, I don't think we ever will. With respect to documents pertaining to Dr. Kirkpatrick's welcome address and US updates on UAP efforts, redacted. The requester is best to seek the information they require from those nations involved. Well, that's exactly what Nick's doing. He's asking New Zealand. Are they saying you got to ask the US? I'm not entirely sure there. Updates from, well, as it pertains to, obviously, they're saying ask New Zealand. Well, I don't think that's what Nick's doing. Updates from Five Eyes partners. Any documents, presentations, or notes on updates provided by the representatives of these countries. The requester is best to seek information they require from the nations involved. Well, again, hasn't Nick done that? He's asked for specific documents or information by New Zealand. Are they coming back and saying we don't have anything? The Five Eyes UAP collaboration way ahead plan, nothing commented there. UAP database, all redacted. So again, more questions than we have answers, but we now know that there was a Lieutenant Colonel, representative of the New Zealand Defence Force, that attended AARO's briefing. and that we also know that there were actions arising, generated from AARO's briefing, but they're also saying that there is more information on AARO's site than was what discussed at unclassified level. There's stuff all on AARO's site. They've got, how many case reports does AARO have? Hardly any. So I'm a bit perplexed as to that comment there from in discussions with the AARO office. There is more information on the site than what was discussed at the unclassified level last year. Was there unclassified as well as classified discussions? I think that's an interesting thread to maybe pull on that one. So again, kudos to Nick for securing release of that information. Again, it's just more breadcrumbs. It doesn't give us a whole lot of clarity, other than that there are still things that we certainly don't know, but we're getting a little bit more from folks like Nick and John Greenwell on the US front, and folks in the UK, Daniel Otis in Canada, and certainly myself on the Australia front, and others. So let's now kind of wrap things up towards the back end. We'll just have a brief review of what is ahead. Now, November and December looks like it's going to be jam-packed with a hell of a lot of activity, because we know that there are 2 UAP hearings ahead. We know that Nancy Mace is going to chair the next House Oversight Committee hearing on UAP, which is currently being scheduled for the 13th of November, 14th of November for us down under. And if anyone has seen the hearing that she attended and pressed the then director of the Secret Service on, she is a real firecracker. So I think she's going to have some pertinent questions on Immaculate Constellation. And so I see her as certainly the immaculate congresswoman, the one that is going to ask some good questions on that alleged program. So it'll be very interesting to see which witnesses called forward to testify at that hearing, presumably all under oath, and the questions that are going to be asked now that the word on the street is that Immaculate Constellation was a program that was implemented in 2017. Now, we know Kirsten Gillibrand is also keen to do a hearing and get the new AARO director, John Kozlowski, before the Senate committee and testify, hopefully under oath. But former director Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick was not sworn in. He did not testify under oath, nor did Scott Bray or Ronald Moultrie when they testified in May 2022. So it would be good to see Dr. Kozlowski sworn in under oath and provide sworn testimony. And one of the questions I would love Senator Kirsten Gillibrand to ask is, seeing as David Grusch was hesitant to sit down with AARO to share what he knows on alleged crash retrieval and reverse engineering programs and allegations of fraud, waste, and abuse, will you commit to addressing the concerns that David Grusch had in terms of AARO being cleared to receive his classified testimony? Because that was the big contention, and I covered this extensively in last month's episode. Will David Grusch meet with the new AARO director? So I think that would be a good question to ask for Senator Kirsten Gillibrand to ask Dr. John Kozlowski, because if he says yes and he delivers on that commitment, then David Grusch has absolutely no reason not to meet with the AARO director, irrespective of his feelings of AARO and the former director, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who we know there was bad blood between the two of them, because we've seen that in signal exchanges between Chris Mellon and others. I don't think there is any compelling reason for David Grusch not to share what he knows with Dr. John Kozlowski if he can deliver on a commitment for AARO and he to be cleared to receive his classified testimony. That's just my position. I think if he says he's not going to because he doesn't trust AARO, well, that's incredibly unfortunate and puts us at a stalemate. I don't think we're going to, I don't think anyone in Congress is going to be ever cleared to receive David Grusch's testimony, because even the staffers in the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Senate Intelligence Committee weren't cleared to receive all of his testimony in its entirety at classified level. So I think there is a good opportunity to get that question asked of Dr. John Kozlowski. We also know that the Sol Foundation is holding its second inaugural symposium next month, 22nd and the 23rd in San Francisco. Hopefully that event will be recorded, and much like the inaugural symposium, it's put out on YouTube for us to review and digest that content. I was invited to attend the Sol Foundation's second symposium. I was actually very honored and privileged to receive an invitation to attend. I won't say anything more than that. Unfortunately, I can't go due to family commitments, but I would very much love to have an opportunity to attend a future Sol symposium if I'm afforded the opportunity. So who will be attending the Sol event? Well, let me pull up the Sol website so you can see a description of Sol's symposium in San Francisco. Obviously, I won't read about organized by Sol's board of directors, Dr. Gary Nolan, Peter Skafish, and Jonathan Berthe. The symposium features them as speakers as well as other prominent and new UAP voices, including Yoshiharu Asakawara, General Secretary of the UAP Caucus Parliament of Japan, Dr. Eric Davis, who is, I believe, supposed to attend and speak last year but didn't. So Dr. Eric Davis, theoretical and applied physicist for EarthTech, formerly the Aerospace Corporation. So formally, he's no longer with them. That's interesting. Dr. Stephen Finley, Chair of African and African American Studies, Louisiana State University. Rear Admiral Dr. Tim Gallaudet, former administrator for NOAA. Ryan Graves, Executive Director for Americans for Safe Aerospace. Leslie Keane, journalist and author, UFOs, generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record. Kirk McConnell, who I think is a very interesting individual. He is the one that attended and was in part responsible for organizing the 2018 briefing that Brandon Fugel presented at, and that we know Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick attended after not being able to remember that he attended. So I think Kirk McConnell is also on the board of the UAP, Disclosure Fund, with Carl Nell, with Lou Elizondo, with Matt Ford, with some other individuals as well. So I think Kirk McConnell is a very interesting individual, and he's going to be featured in James Fox's upcoming documentary, The Program. Eric Schrock, former Deputy Director of Technology Development Integration at Lockheed Martin. That's interesting. That would be interesting. Dr. Jacques Vallée, computer scientist and author, Passport to Magonia and the Invisible College. Dr. Beatrice Villarreal, astronomer, and astronomer of the vanishing and appearing sources during a century of observations, Vasco Project. Rizwan Virk, entrepreneur, investor, founder of Play Labs at MIT, and author of Startup Myths and Models and the Simulation Hypothesis, and Dr. Alexander Wendt Mershon, Professor of International Security and Professor of Political Science at The Ohio State University. So what I've included in the links in the show notes below, if you're interested to learn a little bit more about those individuals that are going to be presenting at Sol. So Keith Basterfield has done an article on his blog that goes into a little bit more detail about who those individuals are. So I've again put that in the show notes. I won't read through it. You can have a look at it at your leisure. Keith always does some great research and some great articles on his blog, so you can get a little bit of a paragraph or two about each of the individuals that are attending and presenting at the Sol Foundation's second annual symposium. So feel free to check that out if you're interested. All right, let's come to the back end of this session. Let's talk about some things that are coming soon to Netflix, and that is George Knapp's new docuseries, Investigation Alien. He announced that on the 12th of October, and there is a trailer that you can watch for that series. I've added the link in the show notes, so if you haven't had a chance to view the trailer, check it out. It does look pretty cool. I mean, I'll admit I'm looking forward to seeing it. It'll be interesting to see what's presented, the different cases. I know George is loved by many and also disliked by probably few. So maybe not as many as those that enjoy hearing from him. I'm just interested to watch it as someone that takes the topic, is very curious and interested on the topic. So it'll be interesting to see what is presented in that docuseries. Well, there's also, we know that what else happened? What else is about to happen? Well, Sky Canada project, it's now long overdue for their report. And Daniel Otis, put this out earlier this year that Sky Canada project, the government's top science advisor, is calling for the release of more UFO information and says her office will publish a public report by the early fall. Now that's, early fall. When was that? That's pretty much a couple months back. So it's now overdue. So that report will probably come at any point in time now. And Daniel Otis was recently, in terms of what the Sky Canada project is, if you're not aware of it, it's an effort, it's an undertaking by the Canadian government or the chief scientist, really asking the question, who is compiling and analyzing UAP observations made by Canadians? And so Daniel Otis was recently on an episode of Rebelliously Curious with Chrissy Newton, where he talked a little about the Sky Canada project initiative and what we can maybe expect to receive from the report. So let me play this brief clip for you so you can hear from Daniel directly.
I think it's been the past year or two, Sky Project Canada was announced, and it's been looking into coming out with a report about identified flying objects within Canada. Have you heard when that report might come out? And then will they be mentioning potentially, do you think, the Yukon incident as well? And how would they maybe potentially be referencing it, in your opinion?
Well, I don't want to speculate on what that report is going to contain. I have been told that the report will be released before the end of this year. And I hope once, I am able to get a copy of it, I really hope to be able to report on that in the near future. It should be noted, though, that, this report, it's called the Sky Canada Project. It's from the Office of the Chief Science Advisor of Canada, who's basically like a arm's length scientific advisor to the Prime Minister and the cabinet and his cabinet. So they're on totally their own initiative. They're doing a report that seeks to describe UAP procedures in Canada and offer recommendations for improvement, if any. Based on what I know of, how these things are recorded in Canada, there is room for improvement. The report that they're going to put out, though, is not going to deal with any cases or sightings themselves. It's really focused on the procedural aspect of how these incidents are captured. Perhaps in the future, maybe they might be inspired to do a second report, that does focus on cases or other aspects of this phenomenon. I don't know. But I really look forward to seeing what they come up with. But even if they come up with great recommendations for improving data collection on UAP in Canada, there's no guarantee that the federal government will adopt the recommendations that they're giving. So, this whole report I think it's going to be interesting, but it's a big question mark. But, it's October. Maybe within the next 2 months, we'll see it.
So watch this space. Be interesting to see what comes out of that report from Sky Canada Project, and what potential implications that may have for discussions down under. If Senator Whish-Wilson or others leverage the information that comes out of that report in Canada. That's a second ally of the United States that is taking the UAP topic seriously. Perhaps hasn't gone as far as the United States, but has certainly undertaken an assessment to see if it is worthy of consideration for implementing reporting procedures and protocols. So kudos to Canada, the Sky Canada Project, for undertaking that assessment, and it'll be interesting to see what comes of that report when it is released. There's plenty of other things happening as well, folks. So the other things that we got lined up, we know that James Fox recently dropped on social on X that the program is not far away, and we know there are a number of new whistleblowers that are coming forward and that are going to be featured in his documentary. We all know that Jason Sands is one of them. We know that Sarah Gam is another. She's been on a number of podcasts as of late with Matt Ford. She recently sat down with Ross Coulthart on Reality Check, and I think has just done an interview did one with Vinnie Adams for Disclosure Time. I think it was done one with Andy McGrillen for that UFO podcast. So interesting to see the program. There seems to be a lot of positive hype around it, and looks like James Fox has recently done a screener to a whole bunch of prospective buyers, and it sounds pretty promising that he's going to get some distribution for it, hopefully sooner rather than later. So we'll be interesting to see if that comes out soon or if it's going to be slated for 2025, and if it's going to move the needle as well. But based on what you hear from Jesse Michaels, who had a screening with Hal Puthoff, he seemed to be pretty impressed with it. So fingers crossed, and see if we're all impressed as well. Not to be outdone by the program, there is another docuseries coming out, MGM Plus, who I'd never heard of, another streaming service to buy. They're putting out a series called Beyond that will be interesting. I think it was shot quite a bit of a while back now. I saw the trailer for it. You can find it on, I think I may have linked MGM Plus's X post in the show notes. So if you haven't seen the trailer, have a look at it. It'd be an interesting series. That's only a few days away. So that's the 27th. I don't know if MGM Plus has a presence in Australia. So as always, we might need to be VPNing it and try and get it from somewhere else. So another thing that's coming out in the weeks ahead. And we also know that next month, on the 6th and the 7th of November, there's another Senate estimates hearing for Foreign Affairs, Defense and Trade. Now, again, I don't anticipate that Senator Whish-Wilson will probably be attending in person, asking questions, because of the fact that you have to wait around all day to get some time. But I imagine I've already submitted a number of questions for Senator Whish-Wilson's consideration as questions on notice. So hopefully he'll be in a position where he can review and consider those for submission based on what has been happening in the last 12 months on the topic. And I imagine he'll be interested to learn what comes out of the congressional hearings in the US next month and beyond for Kirsten Gillibrand. Now, AARO, where the hell is volume 2 of their historical report? That was due back in, I believe, June, and we're now in October. When is that going to be made available, and what's going to be incorporated in it? It'd be interesting to see when that drops. And we're expecting, I think, another annual report that there's a classified version that will go to Congress, and there'll be the unclassified version, volume 2. That there's actually an annual report that is to be released as well, not just the historical, but there I think will be an annual report that is scheduled to drop for fiscal year 20. Is that fiscal year 24? I imagine so. So there's the volume 2 historical report from AARO, as well as an annual report that is to be provided to Congress each year. So more information coming our way. And for those that would like, I guess, something that's a little bit more entertaining, You have John Stewart, who has been working and promoting tirelessly his documentary, The Alien Interview, comes out Thanksgiving. So whether or not you're interested to watch that with a smile and a smirk on your face, or you're very interested to watch it from a serious aspect, I'm going to watch it nonetheless, just to see what he has been able to put together. I've been a bit critical of some of the things that John has posted on social, but he's obviously put in a good effort and a considerable amount of money to put together a documentary. So, as a filmmaker, I'm just interested to see what he can come up with. Just a couple of announcements before we wrap things up, folks, and we wrap it under 4 hours. A few months back, I did an episode on Dr. Stephen Greer. Did he brief an Australian Minister for Defence? And if you haven't watched that episode, feel free to go back and have a look at it. Thanks to some new information that has come out, courtesy of Jimmy. So thanks to you, Jimmy, and others. I will be doing a part 2 on did Dr. Stephen Greer brief an Australian Minister for Defence? Just not as full on as the first one, a bit more of an abbreviated version to give an update on new information that has come to light. So keep a lookout for that one in the not too distant future. And finally, as we wrap things up, just a couple new additions to the merch store. If you're keen to support the channel above and beyond, like, share, subscribe, and wear some fun and interesting apparel. A few new things that I've added to the merch store. The Foyer fans out there in Australia will love, and the US, B1 and B2. If you know your Foyer, Folly, and Bananas and Pajamas, you'll get that joke, hopefully. I've also got 50 Shades of Grey, just another fun one with 50 fun alien faces on the apparel. We've also got our good friend, just in time for Halloween, Michael Myers with abducting an alien in grey. So the tagline for Halloween was the night he came home. I think it's more appropriate, the night he came home to abduct them. So just in time for Halloween, I don't know. There you go. We also have another addition to the merch store. Secrecy breeds suspicion, breeds distrust, and a few fun designs missing since 1947, and Mr. Grey in the police lineup. So if you're after some fun, cool apparel, feel free to check out the merch store. Link is in the show notes below. That's everything, folks, that I wanted to cover off on in today's live stream. Again, I know it's been a marathon. Thank you for those of you that have stayed with me. I wanted to acknowledge some of the folks that have stayed. So thank you, Jimmy, as always, for a good question too. Where is David Grusch's op-ed? Hopefully that comes by soon, and if and when it's going to drop. Jasmine, thank you for staying with me as well. Some fun additions, so feel free to check those out if you're interested. Really appreciate all the time that you've given me, folks, today. Hope this has been of interest and of value as always. I will endeavor to keep next month's live stream shorter, although I know there are some of you that do enjoy these deep dives. So thank you for taking the time also to post your questions and comments. I always really appreciate the engagement that we have in these shows. And again, feel free, if you haven't already, like, share, subscribe, check out the membership options on Patreon and YouTube. Consider giving us a rate and review on Spotify if you prefer to listen to the Unexplained Rundown rather than watch it. But that's everything from me today, folks. Like I said, really appreciate all the time you've given me today, and hope you have a wonderful upcoming weekend. So bye for now.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever the Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.